Committee. It's 9 o'clock on March 27th, 2015, and we'll start the meeting by asking our clerk to call the roll.
Senator Jim Bill. Assemblymember David Schiff. David Finnegan. Steve Finnegan.
Here.
Dr. Collins.
Here.
Roland Kay. Richard Marcantonio. Here. Pam O'Connor.
Here.
Each one.
Present. Thank you. Well, I want to welcome you all to our March meeting. We were aware of the absences that we have today. Folks had called in advance. Today we've got to continue to pursue our statutory responsibilities to study the road charge alternative to the gas tax, continue to gather public input, and do what we can to develop recommendations to create a road charge pilot program, hopefully starting early next year. We've got a very full agenda today that's going to cover a variety of topics related to communications. We're going to talk about technology considerations today. And these things are all in an effort as we develop our whole design recommendations for the road charge pilot program. And to continue our tradition of completing committee meetings on time throughout the day, as topics come up that are important but not agendized or may warrant more substantial discussion than what we have time for today, we'll put those in the area that we call our parking lot. That way they can be addressed at an appropriate time in the future. I want to just take this opportunity to remind everybody that questions and comments from the public are welcomed, are encouraged, so we can continue to gather information from the public. That's really one of the main purposes of these meetings as we hop around the state, is to gather public input. And if there's somebody in the audience that sees an item that they would like to speak on, we have blue cards. Ann, you want to hold up blue cards? Everybody could see those. That's the blue card. Please fill that out, and Ann Johnson will get it up to me. Definitely have you come up to the podium to ask questions or provide any feedback. So the first item on our agenda is to look at the minutes from the meeting of February 26th, and they're in your packet for review and approval. And this is an action item, and so if there is a motion to approve the minutes from February 26th, we'll entertain it at this time.
I'll move approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Finnegan, a second from O'Connor. Is there any discussion on the motion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. We recently received notice that Supervisor Scott Haggerty had to resign from the road charge committee. His resignation letter just stated the time commitments that he had just didn't make it possible, although he said he would continue to monitor our efforts and is very supportive. So utilizing the consultation process that's contained within the Senate Bill 1077 statute, a replacement member was identified, and yesterday the California Transportation Commission appointed Supervisor Lisa Bartlett from Orange County to serve as our newest urban elected official committee member. Supervisor Bartlett serves in the 5th District and is vice chair of the Orange County Board of Supervisors. She also sits on the board of directors to OCTA, to the Orange County Transportation Authority, and is the former mayor of the city of Dana Point. Because this was last minute, Supervisor Bartlett was not able to be here today. However, I believe somebody from her staff is either in the audience or plans to attend the meeting today, and they're certainly monitoring it. But we look forward to Supervisor Bartlett joining us in our future meetings. So as we move to the next item on the agenda, we've got actions and updates, item 4 of ongoing work. And as I mentioned, we've got a very compressed timeline to deliver recommendations on the pilot program that have to be in place, designed by this December. And so per the committee's request, a decision schedule identifying key decision points has been produced for our consideration. And Jeff Doyle of our consulting firm, he's here, and will give us an overview of that schedule. Jeff?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the committee. On the screen projected above my head, but in front of you, will be just a snapshot of the decision schedule that you all have been looking forward to seeing in a little more detail than we've provided it to date. But first, starting at the highest CLIP level, this is, again, just an overview of the entire roughly 3-year program for the California Road Charge Pilot Program. We are in Phase 1, which is really the foundational phase, the most critical part of the pilot program design, where your recommendations will be shaping what the pilot is trying to simulate in terms of public policy, but also technical operations. And what we've tried to do here is tie back what your responsibilities are to the original enabling legislation. And then, as you might remember from the briefing, well, I see we have animation here. Excuse me while I click through these. And then as you move through your decision process, we'll essentially be building a wireframe of what the pilot project would be. Once the recommendations are in, we'll enter a design, or actually somewhat concurrently, we will be designing the pilot test itself, which will also include an in-progress evaluation as well as a post-project evaluation. Now, what is evaluated will be up to you also according to the statute. You will decide what the evaluation criteria will be, and that'll be outlined in a moment here for you. At the end, there will be a summary report. You have your responsibilities to report, so does CTC and CalSTA as well, coming back. In your briefing book materials that you were mailed, there's much more detail in there on the actual meeting by meeting, so it's in chronology, decision schedule. So this is, unfortunately, I couldn't project it on a screen in one page, so we'll have 2 pages, but what we have is by month, and then we have the general topic, or what we would call a work stream, that informs your decision. And then finally, in the right column you see projected there are the specific questions or decision points that will be in front of you for your, your decision and your advice. And one thing I would like to point out right from the get-go is that although we have posited these questions as best we can to capture the essence of what's needed for the pilot program and also what's required under statute, we are continually refining them, and I want to thank and acknowledge the work of both Caltrans and CTC staff in trying to refine these questions so that we can be efficient at meetings and get the types of decisions that are going to make this project successful. Again, skipping ahead, you're looking now at roughly the second half of the project. An important note here is that by the time while your recommendations will be feeding into the construction of the pilot test, you can revisit any recommendations that you make as you get more information. So, for example, as you get information about the business case evaluation, the costs of operations, that type of thing. If there's something in there that's troubling to you or that it causes you to want to make a change to your previous recommendation, the program that we have laid out will accommodate that up until about September. And once we get to September, that's when we would hope that we would have finalized decisions, that you would have had all the presentations that you need to move forward. That's really it. I would point you, I guess, to the briefing book for more detail. We have it broken out by month, so if you want to see in a little more detail what the statutory direction is and then what the questions are, and then also the types of work stream presentations that you'll be receiving at a minimum, you can do that in the briefing book as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Jeff. And I wanted to kind of push number 4 before number 3, because now that you've got that schedule, we'll kind of jump backward a little bit. And if you don't mind, go backward a couple of slides and just get let's get that immediate stuff. And then I just want to kind of go around the committee table to see if there's any members of the Technical Advisory Committee that want to provide any comments on issues or reports since our last meeting, or anything that you'd like to add? Nothing? All right. Well, that's... Richard?
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was pleased to be appointed to represent the social equity voice on this committee, and after our last meeting, we were asked to start reaching out to potential members of the public who could give input into this process. I have been finding that the way that we are approaching our statutory responsibilities are making it difficult, at least for the constituents in low-income communities of color, to really have a voice in this process. And when we come back to the action item on the schedule, I'm going to want to suggest let me just lay out what I'm going to suggest.
Well, this is going to be an action item right now, so if there's something that you want to add
Yeah.
to it, please. There is, if you're talking about outreach and things, in item 6 on the agenda, we've got an extensive communications presentation which gets into public input and the stakeholder plan. So that might be the appropriate area to come.
Well, I'll be speaking up at that point as
Okay,
well. But
sure.
what I'm going to be asking us to consider and making a motion if necessary is that at our next meeting, we come back and provisionally adopt 2 or more alternative manual options, non-technological options for the pilot.
Okay.
The reason I'm going to suggest that is in part because having those concrete options out there is going to make it possible for people to see what we're talking about, see that we're talking about something that doesn't involve tracking them by GPS, which we've all, which Senator DeSaulnier recognized as a major issue that he wanted us to address. It's going to make it possible for us to look at the options that are most likely to affect low-income drivers and really bring that lens of social equity. As we all discussed last month, we want to integrate those considerations throughout our process. And then I think it's also going to make it possible when we come back to the technological options to be able to have something to compare them to and say, are they better or worse than these other options? I'd like to hear other comments from other members before I bring that motion, but that's what I am.
And I appreciate that. And I personally support the concept of getting manual taken care of up front. I think as you and I chatted on the phone, several weeks ago, it's an underpinning of having public confidence in this process so people don't feel as though whatever ultimately is created in a pilot program has to include the paper and pencil or perhaps an annual prepay or whatever, but really with it being centered on no need to know time or place, no need for technology, but basically a very simple approach. And I concur. I think that's something. And if you look at the schedule, what we have there for March, should automated reporting and recording be offered in addition to manual? So we almost start off with manual as a basis, as a backbone. So that's at least, I see nodding of heads. I mean, I don't know if anybody else wants to comment on that, but I think there's unanimity in your request. Is there anybody that wants to comment on that? We'll go to Steve Finnegan and then to Marty Wack.
I'll just add to that thought. I think part of what you're speaking to and what Jim was speaking to is options and choice. And I think that can be in the range of manual and technology driven. And so I think some of those decisions are coming now, or recommendations. But I think it's a good point, and I think that options and choice should be fundamental to what we do moving forward.
Professor. I don't think your mic is on. Hit the press. There you go. Now you're on.
As I was reading the materials, nowhere was it explicitly stated, and on the slide it's not explicitly stated, that participation in the pilot program which we are considering will ultimately be voluntary, as opposed to being required of some classes of drivers in California or classes of vehicles. And to me, that's very closely related to the point Richard raised. The necessity to design the system differently if it's mandatory for someone is to me a very important issue. So may I ask whether this schedule and the decision points listed presume that participants in the pilot program will be volunteers? That to me is like a fundamental question.
Well, just for me, it's always been my assumption, but I think that yes, they would be voluntary, but I think that as part of our actions today, why don't you include that as part of the motion, and we will make that so if that's the will of the committee. Lee?
Yeah, I just wanted to offer my support for Richard's general idea. I think it makes perfect sense to establish what is the lowest tech, basic, most simple way we're going to do this, because that is actually, as Richard said, the baseline against which everything else can be compared. Otherwise, we start with the more high-tech options and we think about all the possibilities. We have no just sort of ground truth we're going to compare them to. And so it just seems like, we don't have to make obviously final decisions on what the non-tech options are, but we have to at least have, because I have no clue right now whether it's really just going to be me with my little Moleskine notebook taking, odometer readings, or what it is that we have in mind. And once we get that nailed down, it'll also give a lot of I think, security to folks in California who are concerned about their privacy. So I hope we can make some progress on that very soon.
Let me ask either Susan or Carrie or Norma, is this something that we should go ahead and put this in as part of the item that we're on now, or would you want us to do it at the...
Well, at the committee, what I would suggest is agenda item 13
Thanks.
is where we're asking for action from the committee on these types of policy decisions for moving forward. So if we want to explore, 2 manual options, we're going to hear about the different options today, and then we're going to come back at the end of today and ask you to, take some actions on some of these basic policy decisions that you want to make, and that could also include voluntary participation.
Yeah, if you look at, thank you very much. Yeah, if you look at the agenda item 13 PowerPoint, there's 3 bullets on there, and we'll get to that. But to address the issues, it asks, should automated distance recording and reporting be offered in addition to manual? So, Richard, it's already assumed in that PowerPoint that manual is there, but I think we should make that very clear. It also asks, should GPS be offered in the pilot, and should the pilot test simulate an open system option? And then get to Marty, your comment. There should be another one, should the pilot be voluntary? So I think when we get to item 13, and the reason we put item 13, obviously, at the end, is because there's so much of what we're going to be doing today absolutely leads up to those things. So again, hearing the sense of the committee, and Richard, thank you for those introductory remarks, I think we get a good sense of where we're going. So it kind of sets the stage for where we're at. So with that, the schedule is the item before us to take action on. It does, as Jeff pointed out, give us a variety of topics we're going to be talking about. Clearly, March is technical and communications. As you see, April is more technical, organizational, and more communications. May are the policy issues. We really get into an evaluation strategy in July. And by the time we get to September, October, we're pretty much about to put a bow on this thing. And I know, Norma, I don't know if you want to comment as to scheduling, but I understand that you guys are anxious to get started on this as well.
Absolutely. There's a lot of work involved in trying to design the actual pilot, and there has been a request to expedite and complete the pilot a little sooner, so we are evaluating that. And regardless, we do need decisions from this group in order to move into the second phase, and we are hopeful that we're going to get there in this time frame. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Secretary, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I just certainly echo what Norma said in terms of the timeline. The current baseline in the legislation, of course, is June of 2018, and we're looking to see if we could accelerate that into the the prior year, perhaps in that range, that same June, July, August range in 2017.
All right, thank you very much. Steve?
A quick question on that acceleration. And I wonder, and maybe now is not the appropriate time, but maybe either later today or through this process, if that acceleration can be related back to the work of this committee. So how is all of the decision points and all the timelines that are laid out on these charts here, how do those relate to the desire to accelerate things? And that would be useful.
We can go into that in more detail. At this point, we're not anticipating changing any timeline for this committee. We're still moving along the same time frame that we had previously. What we're doing is shortening the other phases and overlapping some of that work.
And just as a reminder, what you see on this schedule of March through December is really the first phase of this committee. You guys aren't going to be released until this thing is all done. I think you know that. Have to keep reminding you that this is obviously a lot more activity now, but once it gets thrown back over to Secretary Annis's office, and whether it's DMV or Caltrans is going to be implementing it, those things are, to be determined. You will still be, as a task force, consulted, perhaps not as often, but will be part of the process pursuant to the legislation. So with that, we have an action item to adopt this schedule through December of 2015. Do I have a motion? Moved by O'Connor.
And I'll second it with the repeating what was said earlier, that we'll always have an opportunity to come back to things, and if we miss something, we can come back.
All right, but motion is second. Any discussion on the motion?
Yes.
Richard?
While I appreciate that we will have the opportunity to come back and adjust the schedule, I'm not prepared to adopt a schedule that doesn't have us explicitly making a provisional decision about non-tech options at our April meeting. What I do see in the briefing booklet that
how about if we do it at the March meeting on item 13? Yeah. That's what we were just talking about.
If we make that decision about the non-tech options today.
That's what we talked about. Do it for item 13.
Thank you.
Okay, we're good?
And we can always come back and adjust.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, we can't go back in time, but we can.
Yeah, exactly. One of the hallmarks, at least in my mind, of this task force, and which is why we're in this much more intimate setting, albeit a little bit wider room this time than last time. Last time we were on a bowling lane. But is really to have that flexibility that Councilmember O'Connor talked about. This is roll up your sleeves type of discussion, and nobody should be inhibited on interrupting or do whatever. Let's get this so we can get our work done. I think it's a little bit better by being more relaxed than like the CTC is yesterday. They're all fancy on that dais and everything.
And my motion wasn't to lock in the stone, but we have a framework, so this is kind of our framework. But as we roll up our sleeves,
exactly.
We'll be figuring it out and might adjust.
Thank you, Pam. Are you good, Richard, with that? Yes. Okay. Very good. Then we do have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes unanimously. Okay, let's go now, as we lead up to item 13. We'll go to item 5 on the agenda, and this is where we get a little bit more into some of the issues. This is an informational item, and Carrie's going to kick us off on TAC resources.
Thank you, Chair. Committee members, last month we introduced the concept of forming a road charge working group, which would be a resource to the TAC, providing industry advice and comments from their areas of expertise. This work group will be headed up by Ann Mayer from Riverside, the Executive Director of the Riverside County Transportation Commission, and will consist of representatives from the business sector, equity advocates, telecommunications and technology, data security, as well as vehicle users, vehicle manufacturers, and fuel distributors. Ann Mayer is here today to provide an overview of the purpose, membership, and responsibilities and the schedule of the work. Ann?
If we could get item 5A up on the screen, I think we've got it. Is there? There isn't anything? Okay.
Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'm Ann Mayer, the Executive Director of the Riverside County Transportation Commission, and I'm really pleased to have the opportunity to serve as the chair of your working group. The primary focus of the working group, and again in item 5A has a summary, a written summary for you to follow, but the primary focus of this working group is to meet the SB 1077 requirements for this TAC to consult with highway users and other stakeholders. So the primary focus of this working group is to ensure compliance with those statutory requirements. Second focus is, given the accelerated schedule that you are all operating under with a great deal of information coming at you on a monthly basis, the other focus of this working group will be to provide timely and effective and efficient feedback for you. So if a technical subject comes up and you'd like some pretty quick feedback from experts in those areas, the focus of the working group would be to be able to provide you with that immediate feedback. And so we think that that really provides an opportunity to ensure that you all stay on schedule, but at the same time have the information that you need so you can make appropriate decisions. The work group members will be asked to review your agendas, to stay abreast of all of the technical subjects that you are tackling, so that when they are called upon to provide feedback and input, they are technically ready to be able to do that. One of the things I really want to point out is that this working group is intended to be complementary to the overall external communication strategy. This is not intended to be the sole area of input for you. It's intended to be complementary of the broader stakeholder outreach programs. The working group will have no more than 20 members. We started this week in reaching out to initial members to ensure, again, the first focus is compliance with SB 1077, so the initial outreach is to those members of the working group that ensure that compliance. As soon as that initial set is established, we'll be continuing the outreach to fill the balance of the work group with stakeholders from around the state. Another objective not only is to have appropriate stakeholders, but also to ensure that we have diversity representation amongst that working group as well. And again, California is a very big state. One size does not fit all, and we need to make sure that you have access to stakeholders that are representative of the population of California. As we move forward in filling the working group, your recommendations or suggestions to staff would certainly be appreciated. Again, wanting to make sure that this work group is a robust committee. Thank you again. I'll leave it there. Thank you again for the opportunity to serve as the chairperson of this working group, and I look forward to working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Ann? Eric?
Can we discuss kind of the makeup and the membership of the working group and who they're representing? Like if there's different, like if there's a transportation representation on the working group?
Sure. So the goal is to try and have this working group fully staffed, for lack of a better word, before your next meeting. So the initial outreach, and I don't have a copy right in front of me, but we're looking at having, for example, Self-Help County Coalition represented, the Rural County Task Force represented, looking at having the automobile manufacturers represented, other user groups represented. We're looking at additional social equity representation. I'm sorry, I don't have them right in front of me. Susan, did you want to fill in?
There's a list on item 6. It's
Okay.
the stakeholder engagement plan,
Right.
which I think is part of the backup. It's got quite an extensive list of folks in the public area. Susan, you want to add to that?
Well, for this work group, we really did you mention the fuel distributors?
I did not.
And that's something that, too, all of you as committee members, if you have contacts in that area, as staff, we would greatly appreciate. Actually, in answer to that question, we have a number of seats to fill. And we would look to you, each of you sitting on this committee, represent your specific areas of expertise. And if you know individuals that would be helpful in keeping track of what you are all working on, the decisions that are going to be coming before you, if there are folks out there that you think would be helpful in acting as a resource to the committee, please let us know. I believe Carrie sent out a note to all of you, And so we're just interested in that. But our list really, in meeting the 1077 requirements, we need to ensure that you have ample access to resources from the vehicle manufacturers, fuel distributors, highway users, and the public. And so we did want to ensure social equity, as Ann said. We also had, we do, one area that we had categorized was tribal representation as well. So we have a list here, and so your input would be greatly appreciated.
Right, and the other thing we did too is looking at the decisions you'll be having to make for the rest of the year, and some of them are very technical. Some of them are very technical, will be dependent on industry input. We're trying to make sure that we have representation on the work group so that we have, we have expertise readily accessible. So that's the other thing that we're attempting to do as well.
And again, if you do look at agenda item 6 is when Julie gets into her presentation, there is a list under stakeholder that shows an extensive bullet list of targeted stakeholders that really get into the categories that Susan was just identifying. So we'll be getting back. Some of these things kind of overlap, but we wanted Ann to be introduced to everybody so you get to know who she is. Very well respected in Riverside County and is going to do a great job leading the work group, and we really appreciate your service.
Thank you.
Richard?
Thank you. And thank you for stepping up to fill this important role. I appreciate the addition of a social equity, one or more social equity representatives, and my question for probably for staff and maybe for you as well is how will those who are inviting members to this working group ensure that it is a highly diverse group racially, ethnically, and in terms of gender?
I think one of the important things for those who agree to be in the working group is that because the membership is only at 20 individuals representing 20 specific areas, those representatives also have to agree to have an outreach plan of their own to ensure that they can branch out to broader groups to seek input as well. So I think that's one of the focuses is to ensure that those who volunteer and agree to be part of the committee, that they're willing to have a broader outreach to ensure that we have as extensive of a representation as possible, because it can cause challenges to have only a solitary viewpoint represented when we're really looking for as broad as possible. So this is a strategic effort to ensure that the work group is not just made up of volunteers, but made up of people who are willing to provide you with as broad of an expertise as possible.
And will the work group itself be diverse?
That is the goal. That is the goal.
And I agree with what Ann said, and in fact, it's so important that every member of the Technical Advisory Committee do just as Ann talked about, and also reach out to constituencies that you have. And as we get into the agenda today, you'll see that we are, both through the Technical Advisory Committee and also efforts of the California Transportation Commission, going to be hosting a variety of discussions around the state beyond just this Technical Advisory Committee. And it's incumbent that each of you identify people that can come to those meetings. So we are doing our best to do outreach. And in concert with that, and Ann, if you didn't have anything else, I was going to ask if there's any member of the public that wants to address this issue. We're going to try to constantly ask that to see if there's anybody that has any questions or comments. Well, seeing none. Thank you so much, Ann.
I was just going to add that Marty and I noted that UCLA is playing at 4:15, but Michigan State, her team is playing later this evening.
My team is playing later this evening, and I love March Madness, and so I'm just at least happy that this meeting will be over in time for the game to be on. Otherwise, I might have to watch it on my iPad. So
they're taking on Oklahoma. Go Spartans!
Go Spartans! Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ann. Let me call up Gary Gutierrez. I think, Gary, we had you to comment a little bit on some of the research angle on things as part of the resources agenda item.
Thank you, Chairman Daffer, committee members. I'm pleased to inform the committee that Caltrans's Division of Research, Innovation, and Systems Information has partnered with a number of California's top academic institutions that are available to provide research on behalf of the TAC. And topics might be anything that would be of interest to the TAC that is associated with a road charge model, where the TAC might believe they need additional information or some more insight on various items. I would like to point out that the turnaround time on such an effort is typically anywhere from 3 to 5 months, and the type of deliverable that one could expect would be in the form of a white paper. Now, I do want to point out that time is of the essence, because if the TAC should desire research to inform the final design recommendations that the TAC will ultimately provide, the research, or I should say the topic research item should be identified no later than June 2015, so that we would have time to do the research and have it incorporated into, or at least provide information towards the final report. Now, I would also like to point out that this resource will be available for the TAC at any time throughout your entire tenure. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have a quick question. Part of the responsibility for us trying to identify the need for additional resource or research is for all of us. But at the same time, what might be helpful is if we're looking through all the decision points that are coming ahead, it might be a good idea for Caltrans or CTC or others looking ahead to try to give your advice also on this is a particular challenging thing. We think you guys and we all might need something else there, and to identify that so we do have time and can receive that information in a timely manner.
Okay. Yeah, we'd be happy to take a look at that in that light.
Any other questions or comments? Marty?
Will we have an item on our agenda to discuss potential research topics, or do you want us to inform you
Whatever
or
you
staff?
want. I'd be very happy to do that. Absolutely. Yeah. Obviously, we've got an extensive agenda with the timeline, but any of these areas we could include research items, and I know Gary's here to help, and will always be available to add to that.
Absolutely.
Very good. All right. I believe that concludes item 6. And again, always asking for members of the public, item 5, to outreach for us, but hearing none, we'll go ahead into now the communications plan, and Carrie will kick that off for us.
Thank you, Chair. As I mentioned at the last meeting, the gathering of public comment is critical to the TAC and the development of the road charge pilot program. After our February meeting, I sent out an email to all of you requesting assistance in identification of potential stakeholders while we internally have an extensive transportation stakeholder list. We want to make sure that we're reaching out to a broader base in order to get that diverse set of public comment and input. First, I would like to thank all of you that did provide your recommendations to me. However, there's still some outstanding. So next week I will be sending out a gentle reminder to get your input, because it really is very critical for us to have that broad base audience. At last month's meeting, there was a spirited discussion on the need for a robust public participation program, and we were introduced to Donna Lucas of Lucas Public Affairs, who is a member of the D'Artagnan consulting team. Donna and her team have developed a public participation engagement plan, and for your consideration today, Julie Marengo, Senior Vice President at Lucas Public Affairs, will be presenting the plan and will be taking your questions. At the conclusion of this agenda item, we would like the TAC to take action on the program in order for staff to initiate the public participation program. Julie?
Good morning, I'm Julie Moreno with Lucas Public Affairs.
Do you want to push the button?
Is that better? Okay. I want to walk you through the public input and stakeholder engagement plan that we've developed. And I want to start, and it's the first slide of my presentation, really with kind of some insight and background on what the thinking is and what the strategy is in the approach. It's very important because we all know that this portion of the project is incredibly important, and it's really important that we all understand what we're seeking to get out of it. And what we're seeking to get out of it is to inform and engage a very broad array of stakeholders throughout California, regionally, ethnically, industries, whatever their connection to the road is, we want to find out what their perspective is. And so we've looked at creating a process here to inform and engage folks. I'll walk through kind of the approach, and then we'll get into the specific outreach plan once we do that. So really the parameters that we started with was to establish a sound process, that this really is about reaching out and gaining input. We're informing folks to brief them and let them know what's going on, but really the purpose here is to invite them to provide input and invite them to participate and weigh in on this process. And so to do that, we plan to communicate transparently in a very broad fashion, provide opportunities for them to provide input and make recommendations. We want to effectively inform and support your decision-making process. Again, that's really the goal, is to reach enough folks and to hear from enough different perspectives to bring that feedback back into this group so that you have the benefit of those points of view when you're making your decisions. The next step was really looking at what stakeholders are we talking about. It's a very broad universe. We're trying to be very thorough. And so to do that, to reach such a thorough, comprehensive group, we've built some efficiencies into the outreach process, which we'll talk about. But that's really it. I mean, virtually anybody in California has a connection to this, so we have to think about it through that lens. And then really the last step is achieving meaningful engagement, giving everyone the opportunity to provide direct input through different mechanisms, whether that's through whether they're community groups or they're industry groups, a direct line of communication through the website, which we'll talk about, working through the work group, or even through all of you. We've tried to provide a variety of means for people to weigh in. But that's really the strategic process that we walk through to do this. So this is just a pretty chart to show you, I think, really the steps involved. And so we're really at the preparation phase right now, here presenting to you what we've planned, getting your approval today on the action plan that we've put together, really being clear on what the TAC needs to hear from the public, and so that we can create the questionnaire and the outreach in the appropriate way to get back the information that you need, identifying the stakeholder universe, really laying the groundwork for us to then do the outreach and start getting the feedback. The middle process is really where we, is the next step, identifying the needs. The work group will be up and running. We'll begin the outreach and start getting the feedback back. The last step is really the TAC process and getting input, having it be recorded and analyzed, brought forth to all of you so you can understand the perspectives of the public and the different stakeholder groups, consider those things, make decisions, and have that inform the process. So that's really just kind of the broad, almost strategic overview, if you will. And we wanted to start from that place so you really understand where we're coming from on this. That this isn't, we're not going out in a typical campaign fashion to try to sell folks on this idea. That's not what we're doing. This is a vetting process. We're really about informing people of what the mission of this group is, the legislative direction or directive, and then the fact that we'd like to hear from them and that their input will be considered as the pilot project is scoped. Okay? So I don't have a slide for this, but you in your packets have an outline of the engagement plan. And so let me just walk through it and tell you, again, what we tried to do is incredibly, this is the plan that I'm working off of, it's an incredibly ambitious proposal. So what we've done is we've broken up the different sort of stakeholder groups or outreach groups, if you will, into categories. The first, of course, being the TAC and your constituents. As Ann said, part of the work of this group, and we expect the work group will be to represent those interests and your folks of like-minded folks at these meetings and to bring that perspective to these meetings. Clearly, that work will be done here at the TAC meetings, the work with staff, Caltrans and CTC staff to do that, and that's immediate and ongoing. The work group, I know that's still being scoped and still being defined, but we expect that will be another robust group of stakeholders whose perspectives will be solicited, and that feedback will then be brought into the TAC process as well. And so from there, once we get outside these groups, now we're looking at ways to engage the general public and a very wide variety of additional stakeholders. And so what we want to do is create a communications infrastructure, essentially, sort of the hub of which will be a website with some nothing fancy, but very useful, we hope, with good background information on what this issue is, what this group is tasked with doing. But also on that website, I know these meetings will be webcast. That will be available on the website also. But kind of the cornerstone and the way that we're working to create some efficiency in this feedback process is through a questionnaire. A questionnaire that will be available on the website that anybody from the public or within the stakeholder groups that we'll be reaching out to can provide direct input that will be collected by staff, will be analyzed, and will be brought back through this group. Again, we are casting a very wide net. We're working through organizations and stakeholder groups, but also doing some public outreach to get folks to engage. We hope that questionnaire will be readily available and accessible to anyone who can go to the website, and an equal opportunity for all to provide that feedback. Also, to get public input, and I think in a very smart and efficient way, is through polling, public opinion polling. D'Artagnan will be conducting that, and some focus groups. And I believe that the focus groups will be, there will be 4 of those throughout the state. And so that's another way to have an informed conversation with members of the public, to bring that input back in to this group. And again, creating some efficiency around having informed conversations to really push and test and see where some of the hot button issues for people are. Any questions on maybe general public, where I can walk through the rest of it?
If I could, just to interject on that item, the attachment that you all have, just looking at your own names on that TAC and constituents, really your homework assignment and continued assignment is to try to make a list of folks that you know, whether it's a meeting that you host, or it's names that you give to Julie and or to the CTC staff, so they can make sure that we're doing our very best on the outreach. I mean, that's key. It doesn't do us any good to just come up with the idea. Clearly, you're all getting an education on this, but we need to make sure that we go out to the public and seek as much input from the diversity of this state, which from north to south. Marty, and then Steve.
Without taking very much time, I think I mentioned at a previous meeting, there is underway in California a National Cooperative Highway Research Program synthesis project of public attitudes and stakeholder perspectives on mileage-based user fees. The principal investigator is Professor Asha Weinstein Agrawal at San Jose State University. And since essentially one of their tasks is to assemble the results of all focus groups and surveys that have been done on mileage-based user fees in the country and even overseas, to date. So I think it's very important that there be some liaison with that group.
Okay, thank you. And also for the public, part of this also is media outreach, is making sure that folks even know what's going on, because the common folks don't know what this is or the fact that it's happening. And so our approach with the press, again, will be similar to the approach that we're going to take with stakeholders, and that is really to inform them of what's happening and to try to target reporters that are more likely, I think, to cover something like this, to offer briefings with them, to sit down and discuss this with them so that it's well understood. Again, more from a informational perspective. We included in that, of course, will be ethnic press. We'll do some social media around that too, and we hope that with the stakeholder outreach that we plan, some of that social media outreach will catch fire among those groups so that they can inform their own constituencies through that very accessible medium as well.
Which was going to be
Go ahead, Dan.
my question, because the website, I mean, if somebody who's more technically oriented wants to delve into it, is from a stakeholder, especially stakeholder group, may go to the website
Sure.
and delve in deeper. And those are the people who might watch our committee meeting. But the average person is not going to watch our committee meeting. They're going to be watching NCAA basketball. So, social media. What are we do? I mean, do we have a robust? Have we thought about a real robust program? I mean, just today, thinking that it was on our agenda, we have the autonomous vehicles and California Transportation Commission. Are we ready? That would be something to get out on social media, even though it's not literally the road charge, but it's a way of us saying, pushing out. So how can we push out this kind of thing that might engage somebody because they say, oh, this catches their eye. They might not quite be, I'm into road charging, but, ways of engaging them.
Right. And we certainly will look for ways to engage them. And to be quite honest, we've been on board really just since the beginning of this month and have been trying to get up to speed and put this plan together. And so we haven't yet delved fully into exactly what that looks like. We have some ideas, but we'll be fleshing that out. So I appreciate your input and any ideas that you do have about that.
Pam, you're spot on. I mean, I think it's those kind of things, which is, again, one of the reasons why it's on the agenda today on the autonomous vehicle thing, because that ends up being a plank in whatever ends up happening. Certainly for the technical side. Non-technical, no problem. But then the technical side, for those that, are okay with embodying that, autonomous will tie very much into that. So, or at least it could.
Yeah.
And that's part of what we need to do. And as Julie said, she's not new to this topic or issues around the state with her many years of experience, but clearly in her short amount of time I've been very impressed with what they've been able to put together so far. And we'll look forward to continuing to take this plan that you have and refine it and doing everything we can to make sure that we're sharing information. And that being said, for any of you on the Technical Advisory Committee, in addition to identifying people that you would want to host a meeting for or provide to add to our list, we're going to put together also a standardized PowerPoint, and we're going to make sure each of you get that. And that's something that if you're ever asked to speak on the issue, I'm sure some of you are, I know I have, you'll have that standard material, and as Julie works on preparing more and more of those things, we'll all be singing out of the same hymnal.
Right.
And that changes from month to month, because as we make decisions,
Right.
we will be able to share with what we've done. But as Steve pointed out and others, nothing is final till we send our report over at the end of the year to the Secretary of Transportation. So we have the right to tweak things and make changes as we go. But if anything, as long as that's indicated when you make your presentations, people understand that, and hopefully you'll get input during those presentations that you can bring back here and share. And that's the whole
Exactly.
idea behind that.
Exactly.
Steve?
Yeah, a quick comment and a question. You touched on two very important things that I think we have to keep in mind. One, I like what you said about, this is not a sales job.
Right.
This is not, it's gathering information. It's understanding sentiments. It's understanding concerns and figuring out a path forward. So I think that's a very good idea. And at the same time, you did touch on media as well. And, I think it's important also to, the good information, as Jim was talking about, does get out to the public.
Right.
Because we don't want, the report to come and all of a sudden it's a big surprise, and that's the big only news story, and everyone is reacting, as they may be in surprise. So I think that's important. And then the question I have is, under the general public item, you have the public opinion polling and the focus groups. You have some months marked there.
Mm-hmm.
When would we be getting? Is that when those would be done, or when would we be getting the results of that?
I'd refer to Jeff on that.
Sorry, I have to page through here to find the decisions. The results of the public opinion.
Just a rough idea of when we would actually see the results of that.
Yeah, it will be midsummer, roughly, and I can get you more detail on that.
I think we were targeting July or something like that.
Jeff, weren't the questions going to be shared in advance for input from this group?
Correct. As soon as next month, we'll start to see some of the survey questions. I thought you were talking about results.
Yeah, no, I was asking about results, but that's good to know.
Yeah, and just an aside, I was chatting with one of my transportation commissioners yesterday morning, and in his full-time job, they've done some surveys, and they start off on road charge, and it's like 23% of the public likes it, and the majority don't. And then they work them through in this focus group process, and after a few minutes of explaining what some of the things you've already learned, and you'll hear more of, how transportation financing is declining, the gas tax doesn't work anymore, et cetera. By the time they're done, the numbers absolutely flop the other way, and people are much more comfortable with a pay-as-you-go user approach.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's interesting, and I think that's part of what Julie will be identifying and what we'll be identifying as we go through this process, so the public will get a better understanding as to some of the things that many of you have been learning and already know about. And we'll have you all as transportation experts by the time this technical advisory committee is over with.
Well, and we're also hoping, the other portion of this plan also, we're also hoping that the public will hear about this also through either their own elected officials, because we have a very robust elected official outreach component to this, and then a myriad number of stakeholders. The stakeholder universe that we are identifying and continue to build out, again, very robust. And so elected officials, we're going to, for elected officials and the robust stakeholder universe, what we're going to do next month by about mid to late April, for elected officials, we'll be doing this in printed format just because of their hypersensitive spam filters in their offices. And to the rest of the stakeholder groups, we'll be sending it via email, but an introductory communication package with a letter that gives them an overview of what this process is, what's on tap, what's coming down the pike, how they can provide input, and ask them to share it then either with their constituents or with their own members. Provide them with a list of the upcoming TAC meetings, and what we're going to be doing is just a one-page, what I call a fact sheet for lack of creativity, I suppose, which is really just a one-pager on the basic components of what this is, what's being asked, what you're deciding, and then really clear information about ways that people can provide input. And so we envisioned that one-pager then would be very easy for an elected official or the head of a chamber of commerce to turn around and either post on their own website or send out to their members, that it's a bit of a pass-through. We want to make it easy for people to not just understand what we're doing by their own right, but then also turn around and make that easy for those that they represent to do the same. And so that mailing will go out, or that email will go out, and again, with highlighting the fact that the website is up, that's where they can get the bulk of the information, and that questionnaire, of course, is always available. We're going to ask people to provide input through that questionnaire, I think through June, just so we can put an end date around it to try to get that input back into this process in time for you all to make decisions and to make sure everybody understands what's expected. And so those stakeholders, we don't have a specific list in this plan. We're building it out. It is in progress. But as I think Jim alluded earlier, earlier, the number of categories and types of organizations, very robust. And we've done a lot of this work in our firm. We've done it around education. We work with the California Endowment. We work with a lot of business groups. We've done work in a variety and diverse issue areas. And so the number of stakeholders, I think, that we have a line of sight to, we're hoping will be quite robust. And so that then goes out in April. We then expect to do some additional follow-up with those stakeholders if we're not hearing from a particular types of groups or not getting certain types of feedback. Certainly then direct and specific follow-up can be made. Elected officials and the stakeholders will make offer to, there will also have a point of contact if they'd like more information, would like to talk to somebody directly. So again, trying to cast a very broad net, but creating some efficiencies around ways that we then get folks to funnel the information back in, just so we can cover as much ground as possible in what is a relatively short amount of time.
Okay, any questions?
Great presentation. I
Thank
think
you.
The outline and all the information is pretty straightforward. I think you hit the key terms, vetting and transparency, which is critical through this process. On the website that's going to be launched, is that going to be running parallel to the current portal that we are part of, Chairman?
I believe the plan is to just move everything over.
Over there? Okay.
Yes, and what we would do is on the commission website have a link to it, so you just click on that. So someone going to the commission website would easily access that website. But we wanted a standalone, really robust website for the effort that you're undertaking.
I think it's a great idea. And would we be able to upload position papers and white papers respectively from our own groups collectively?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I think it's anything that you have to add to it, I think is important. Because again, we want this to be an open and transparent process. We want the public to benefit from all of the information that we gather.
Right.
Okay? Did you? Oh, you're just filling it.
Thank you.
Yeah, there is an echo
Appreciate
in
that.
there.
Thank you.
Oh, turn that micro. Oh, if you're going to speak, keep it on. But yeah, maybe that's why it's causing it. Richard, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I have two thoughts. First of all, I think it's very important to keep the meaningful engagement piece and the education and building support piece very separate. And I'm particularly concerned about the meaningful engagement piece. In my experience, meaningful engagement in low-income communities means ideally it means that they participate in shaping alternatives. That may not happen here, or maybe it will. But I've heard some discussion about community meetings, but all I see on the chart is the 4 focus groups. So where do the community meetings fit into this? I think that's a very important opportunity to go into low-income communities.
I'll have to defer to CTC. I think that's something that they have planned outside of what we're doing.
Well, what we're hoping for is that from each of your viewpoints, where you know where we would be invited to participate, we would look to you to let us know that. As well, we are, at least at the Commission, we are talking about public forums, but they're really not representing the road charge here, where the Commission has other policy recommendations that they may want to communicate. So I think in each of our own worlds, we'll be providing, asking each of you to reach out to your community stakeholders, letting us know where we can participate and provide presentations, go to speak to community groups. And Richard, you and I talked, and I'm hoping to work with you on this very important issue to make sure that we are getting out there to the folks that may not have access to the information that we're presenting through a website and other means. And also, just to let you all know that Commission staff is working with Caltrans staff, and we're talking about, how can we kind of slice and dice to get out there and provide informational materials and presentations, through having a team of staff members that can go out and communicate, And, you know, it's just really educational. Whatever we provide will be, you know, connected to the statute and the work that you're undertaking. So it'll be just very educational, but really the purpose is to seek the input from the folks that are attending and to hear from them what those issues are and to bring that back and report that back to all of you. So this is a high priority for us, and it's something that we want to make sure that we reached out and that we've diligently communicated with those community members.
If I could just add to that, Richard, I think, for example, with public advocates who you represent with the social equity community, I think I would just say, you know, if you guys could host or put together an event, I know staff would attend it and would present. And I think that would be an outstanding way, since you would have those contacts much better than Caltrans or CTC commission staff, to actually help us in those efforts. And that's, again, I encourage each of you as members of the Technical Advisory Committee to take advantage of the offer. So, Lee, for example, with you, if there's folks that are interested, you know, from a privacy rights issue, let's put together a meeting. I mean, I would much rather have a meeting of 20 Leetians in the room that provide additional input, that maybe 19 of them are going to add things that you didn't tell us. I don't know. But but those are the things that if we could log those and incorporate those and report back here, we're going to have a much better package at the end of the day. Because ultimately, there's 15 members on the Technical Advisory Committee, and there's darn near 40 million residents of the state of California. So we've got to reach out beyond the 15 in this room to do really our job. And so, again, it's incumbent on each one of us on this Technical Advisory Committee to take advantage of hosting an opportunity, and staff and the consultants will participate. This is an action item, by the way, of adopting our communication plan. So if there's any questions or comments on that, we could entertain a motion on it.
I'll move it.
A motion from Eric. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, second from Pam. Any discussion on that, Richard?
Sorry, so I guess what we're adopting is the consultant's plan, but there's also staff activities that will happen that are not included in this plan. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Is there any opposed? There are none. Therefore, the item passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll now go over to Brady Tackle from Caltrans, who's going to give us some additional education, if you will, in the transportation funding mix, which is so critical to what we're doing. And I believe, Steve, you're going to join in as well.
At the end.
At the end, okay. Brady.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, committee members. I'm Brady Tackdahl, Road Charge Project Manager at the California Department of Transportation, also known as Caltrans. At the last meeting, you had a lively discussion about funding, and so lively that it prompted Mr. Will Kempton to literally run across the state capitol and find some transportation funding booklets that we at the department prepare and get those to you on his lunch break. So I hope you found those insightful, but in any event, I'm going to be walking through the state level revenue sources today. And I just want to note right here at the beginning that the department and its activities are funded through these revenue sources that we're going to talk about today, and are therefore considered, we're considered a special funded department. So what that really means is that we do not receive any state general fund revenues. Also, the figures contained in the presentation come out of the governor's 2015-16 proposed governor's budget. We know that the governor's budget numbers are going to be changing, and so we are aware of that, but they are proposed numbers, and that the numbers I use today are rounded for illustrative purposes. So let's dive right in. There are a number of state motorist taxes and fees that are imposed on drivers here in California. I'm going to walk through each of these categories in a little bit of detail and tell you about how much is generated in each source and by law where it's allocated. What is missing from the conversation is federal excise taxes, local sales measure funding, and also any portion of general sales tax that goes to the local cities and counties. So our first source of revenue is our base excise tax on gasoline. It's set at 18 cents per gallon. And in the governor's 2015-16 budget, this tax is actually estimated to generate about $2.8 billion. By law, this revenue source is allocated two ways. It's allocated approximately 36% to local streets and roads, and the other portion is about 64% to the state highway account. Now, the state highway account, it funds Caltrans maintenance primarily, state match for federal funds that fund the State Highway Operations and Protection Program. That's known as the SHOP, and it's our largest rehabilitation program for existing infrastructure. It also funds highway operations and state administration, so folks like me. This, as you can see with the split, the locals get approximately $1 billion, and the state receives about $1.8 billion. Now, the second source of revenue in terms of gasoline excise taxes is what I'm calling today the swap excise tax. Back in 2010, the state eliminated the state portion of sales tax on gasoline and swapped it with an excise tax. Now, this is sort of unique because it is adjusted each year based on revenue neutrality by the Board of Equalization. And what that means is the excise tax is adjusted annually, and it is meant to make sure that if the state were to have a sales tax still in place, that excise tax would generate the same amount of money. Now, this variable excise tax rate has been set by the Board of Equalization for January 1st, 2015 at 12 cents per gallon. And in the 2015-16 governor's budget, this is estimated to generate about $1.8 billion. However, the first billion of this revenue is actually taken right off the top, and it is redirected to back to the SHA to backfill loss of weight fee revenue that we will discuss in a little bit greater detail later. Now, the remaining portion is actually going to be allocated by law three separate ways. It goes 44% to local streets and roads. It goes 44% to our State Transportation Improvement Program, which is our capacity increasing program. And the remaining 12% goes to the SHOP. Using that number, these are the projections that we have out of the governor's budget. Now we're moving away from gasoline excise or gasoline taxes, and we're moving into diesel taxes now. We at the state collect a base sales tax on diesel, and that is 4.75% on diesel fuel. In 2015-16, this tax is estimated to generate about $450 million, and it is allocated two separate ways. Half of it goes to state transportation assistance, and this provides funding for local mass transportation projects. The other half goes to state transit programs, which support state-funded intercity rail and other mass transportation projects as well. I will note that no portion of this revenue goes to maintain, preserve, or rehabilitate existing roadway infrastructure. Also, another piece of the fuel tax swap that was enacted in 2010, there was an additional swap sales tax added onto diesel fuel sales. The state collects a base sales tax or a swap sales tax, I should say, of 1.75% on diesel fuel. However, this is estimated to generate about $170 million in 2015-16. And this revenue source goes 100% to state transit assistance for state mass transportation projects. Again, no portion of it goes to maintain, preserve, or rehabilitate roadway infrastructure. The last component of the diesel fuel tax is an excise tax on diesel. The state collects a variable excise tax similar to the swap excise tax that we talked about in gasoline earlier. On diesel, and that rate actually was set in February of this year to be 13 cents per gallon. In the 15-16 governor's budget, this tax is estimated to generate about $420 million. Now that amount is split two ways again. It's split about approximately 52% to local streets and roads and 48% to the state highway account. Again, just a reminder that the SHA does fund Caltrans maintenance, the state match for federal funds that fund the shop, highway operations, and state administration. As it came up here when I clicked the split, you can see it is approximately 218 to local streets and roads and 202 million to state highway account. And now there's the commercial weight fees that are imposed on commercial vehicles in California. A lot of us drive on the highways and we see the what's called the weigh stations or truck scales. That's how we collect that revenue. And the facilities are operated by the California Highway Patrol, not by Caltrans. Weight fees are determined by gross vehicle weight, and they assume a maximum weight of the loaded vehicle. In 2015-16, the governor's budget estimates about $1 billion in weight fees. But currently, weight fees are not protected by Article 19 of the Constitution and are being redirected to the State General Fund to offset a portion of debt service costs on transportation-related bonds. The next revenue source that we have for the state is motor vehicle fees. A lot of us are familiar with these fees. We pay them as driver's license fees, vehicle registration fees, and in the 2015-16 governor's budget, it's estimated to generate about $3.1 billion out of these revenue sources. These revenue sources are actually do not go to Caltrans. In fact, they go to the California Highway Patrol. They go to the Department of Motor Vehicles and a few other smaller agencies. And I guess the question is, do they go to roads? And the answer is no.
This is one of the big takeaways from this presentation I wanted everybody to see, because so often people think that their driver's licenses and vehicle registration go to roads, and this is one of the reasons for this presentation today.
That's right, Jim. Thank you. And so there's one other motor vehicle-related fee that's imposed on drivers in California. That's known as a vehicle license fee, or VLF. It's the first 0.65% of the purchase price or value when you acquire the vehicle. You pay this fee, and it's in lieu of a property tax. The 2015-16 governor's budget estimates about $570 million that would be generated from this fee. And this fee actually goes to fund local cities and counties. It's deposited into the local revenue fund for public safety. Well, another question of mine is, do you think any of this fee goes to funding state highways? Well, the answer is no. So, in summary, we went through all of the state level related revenues that come into the state of California. In summary, the amount that is generated out of those fees is approximately a little over $10 billion. Once you take away the funding that goes to other agencies, the funding that goes to fund debt service on transportation-related bonds, the portions that actually get allocated towards transit, and the portions that go to capacity increasing projects, really what's left over is about $4.6 billion that's available for road maintenance, rehabilitation, and operations, meaning traffic operations and administration. And that portion actually also includes both state and local portions. So, I did a little calculation to see, how much of the state actually gets out of that, and it's around $3 billion, or only about 30% of the revenues that we talked about today. And so, while we do collect a lot of revenue, I guess, in the state, again, not all of it goes to maintaining, our roadway infrastructure, and really, I think that's what prompted the discussion and really, helped make Senate Bill 1077 come to fruition. And so, with that, I'd like to thank you for your time and Commissioner Madaffer. If we have time for a question or two, I'd be willing to answer.
Absolutely, and I know Steve's got a little follow-on as well, and then maybe we can take both you guys together.
Okay, that
Steve?
sounds good.
He's right behind you.
Thanks very much. You know, I was asked to help out with this presentation, and obviously Brady doesn't need any help. And I'm not going to add a lot or take a lot of time with this, but I wanted to add a few comments, I think, to sort of wrap this up a little bit. You know, one, I think what's clear in looking at all that information is how complicated this stuff is. And the public has no idea. You know, they have a lot of misunderstandings and misconceptions. So I think we're all living in that environment of complexity. There are problems with transportation funding, but I would caution all of us not to overstate some of those problems, especially, you know, people talk about the decline of the gas tax. A lot of that is projections for the future and really hasn't happened yet, so I think, you know, I wouldn't oversell that point as well. Included in your packet is an article that the Auto Club ran about a year and a half or 2 years ago. A little bit starting to get out of date, but I think there's a lot of useful information here. It sort of backs up and talks about what Brady was referring to. On the back, just to let you know, are some policy recommendations that the Auto Club put out, and so if you look at that, you'll know where I'm coming from, as I'll be talking in the future. And, you know, a quick note on policy issues. This is a technical committee, so there's some debate as to what policy issues should or shouldn't be addressed with this committee. But I think we heard at our last meeting, a lot of policy issues are going to bubble up. And I don't think that that's necessarily inappropriate. I think that any recommendations that come out of this committee are going to live in the world that we're all living in and live in that complex world that already exists. And so I think that, you know, whether it's these recommendations or future actions from Caltrans or the Transportation Agency or the legislature later on, they're going to have to, you know, coexist with what people are experiencing today. And motorists are paying an awful lot of money. They're paying it in a lot of different ways. And it's not their fault if the money doesn't go to the right places. So, and this group is not charged with fixing all that, but we're charged with identifying good revenue sources, sustainable longer term, which is vitally important for our state, for our economy, for our quality of life. And we just need to recognize that what we're trying to do has to fit in that universe, and it is a big challenge. So I'll step back, and if there are any questions for Brady or myself, we'd be happy to answer that.
I'll just take the prerogative as a chair and add an editorial comment, and maybe, Brady, back it up just that one slide, if you would. As Steve indicated, there's nothing in the statute that talks about us doing anything other than technical, but there isn't also anything that says that after you guys have seen all of this, if we end up recommending moving forward on a road charge, there's nothing that keeps you also from saying we highly urge that any funds collected go back into the transportation system. One of the things that I have heard in talking to people around the state is their frustration when you see so many people think that vehicle registration goes to roads. But the big takeaway today I could see on all your faces was the jaws dropped, that it doesn't. And, you know, that's not to say the DMV doesn't need funding. We get that. Or the CHP. Something's got to fund it. I get that. But the reality is what the public thinks. And that's what we have to be sensitive to. And if we're going to be recommending a road charge based on miles that somebody drives, the connection to me is their wheels touching the road and the wear and tear of that road. And therefore, you would think that that nexus should be included in our recommendations going forward. Obviously, that's my own editorial comment. You guys, as the task force, will make those decisions as to whether or not we include that. But clearly what you see there it's quite telling. Marty? And then Eric?
Very closely related to the comment that you just made, recall that on several of the slides we saw that a lot of the money, quite a substantial proportion, is redistributed back to local government for their roads and highways. And it's redistributed in this state and in most other states according to formulas or agreements or legislation. And of course, the southern part of the state thinks the north gets too much money. The cities think the rural areas get too much money, and so forth. One of the very important things that we haven't talked much about is that if we use mileage-based user fees which monitor travel, we can actually do a better job of allocating, the state can, not us, I mean the state can do a better job of allocating the money where the road use is concentrated. We would have data on travel on different classes of roads in different counties and different cities and so on, and there would be a basis for allocation of money that would come from data that would be best collected through a GPS system for monitoring mileage-based user fees. And in the national community of mileage-based user fees, there's actually an attitude that unless we collect that data and use it for better targeting the funds, why have a mileage-based fee? Why not just raise the gas tax as a source of revenue? So your point that it should go back to road use is just, to me, the beginning point of this discussion. It should go back to road use where the costs are incurred. It should go back to road use in proportion to the use of roads. And that's, it's not going to be our task to design that system, but I think we have to be aware that the system we choose can give data to the legislature so that they can make better choices in that regard.
Thank you, Marty. Eric?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with your comments, Jim. I think that's why you're the chair of this group. Is that I think that it is imperative that our recommendation does include.
Oh, he's saying Mike.
That our recommendation does include some sort of direct tie-in to go back to the road use. So.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? This was an informational item, but Stephen, you want to put a bow on it?
I'll throw in a comment from here if I don't mind. And just to piggyback on what you said, Jim, I think there are inherent policy issues that need to be talked about, and what vehicles get charged and how the money gets used. And we may have lost our way a little bit in the user pay, user benefit concept, and we need to make sure that this effort circles back with that issue.
I know we'll come back to this. I want to be a voice saying that transit is getting very little of this money, and don't want to lose that piece as well.
Understood.
And I just wanted to say we're probably going to always have this discussion about the virtues of this road use criterion, because I do think that, as Marty points out, there is a direct connection between the using the road use criteria and therefore the metrics, and therefore it goes hand in hand with the potential privacy violation. So it is embedded in that initial premise, and I've already talked about my concerns about that. One of the things I'm curious about from this presentation is, so we see out of these particular revenue sources this amount that's going into road maintenance. Is it the case, therefore, that there isn't any other money going into that from any other sort of state general fund or anything? I mean, this is it?
Norma, you being the chief financial officer at Caltrans,
we have our former budget, Senate budget person here, but actually, no. We don't have general funds for roads.
So this is all there is?
We have certainly the self-help counties. There's 20 of them. They generate significant funds, and they invest a lot of that on the state highway system as well as local roads. But from a state perspective, this is it.
Yeah, and I'll ask Steve to add on to that. But just to the self-help county piece, I mean, it used to be the other way around. It used to be about 60-70% of the money came from the state. But starting in the mid-'80s, when counties adopted their own sales tax measures, anywhere from a half cent or a quarter cent up to a full cent or more towards transit, towards bike and pedestrian, towards highway, it's now it's about 60-70% is coming from the local. And as you can tell by this tiny little number, a lot less from the state. Steve?
Let me make one correction to that. We do receive federal funds for roads, but from a state perspective, we do not receive general fund dollars.
Yeah, and this Brady's presentation was state revenues, because again, road charge is state. So we wanted to make sure there was a clear understanding. Stephen?
And just to piggyback on a couple of those comments, the local transportation sales taxes are a very important part, and although it mostly doesn't go to a lot to state highway maintenance, although some does go to local road maintenance in various counties, it is a big source of funding. It does go to road capital projects, so road improvement projects, have received some of those funds. And public transit, especially in the urban areas, receive a lot of that money. And they also receive at least 20%, probably more, of federal gas tax monies as well. So it is a complicated mix. There is money coming in from different places, and it frankly is a lot of money. And I think that one of the challenges we have going forward is California has relatively high taxes for motorists compared to most other states, with currently the second highest gas tax in the nation. That may be changing a bit. And we also have the local self-help counties local sales taxes, which most other states don't have, or certainly not to the magnitude that we have. So there's a lot of money coming in, and then there's the cap and trade money coming in also. And that's the reality that we're working in to try to come up with more money. You know what I mean, or money from a different way. So we just have to keep all that in mind.
Yeah, I say instead of necessarily saying more money for a declining revenue source, i.e. the gas tax, which we know is doing this, it's only going to get worse. And maybe, Norma, at the next meeting, we could just bring, unless somebody happens to have it with them, there's that chart about the size of that movie screen. I would love everybody on this task force to see. I, for a while, had it on the wall in my office, but it is a flow chart of funding, which I think is an eye-opener for any of you on the technical, and it's also available on the Caltrans website,
Right.
I'm sure.
We are just updating that. It will be available April 1st, and we will be bringing copies for all of you because we can't email that.
Yeah. They print it on blueprint paper. I mean, it's that big. Stephen?
Jim will allow me one last comment on this. One thing we also didn't talk on is toll revenue. And although that's somewhat limited in the state so far, it is a growing source of revenue, whether it's a straight direct toll facility or an express lane or managed lane facility. That is likely to be a growing source of revenue as well.
I actually had a question about that, which is I don't actually understand why. It seems like in the Southern California region, there's a lot of these toll roads that seem not to be very common in the Bay Area where I live. And I was just wondering, is there some legal reason for that? Is there any? Well, on the way from the airport, I was chatting with the shuttle bus driver, and he said, well, what meeting are you going to? I said, it's a transportation committee meeting. Oh, what's it about? I said, it's about the gas tax and road use. And he started to get a little apoplectic when I said that one of the things that people were talking about was charging for how much they drove. And he's going, I drive, blah, blah, blah miles a day. Anyway, and then he started talking about the toll roads, and that's what made me wonder about at least why is it that it seems very different. I have never driven on a toll road in the San Francisco Bay Area, so it's like an alien thing to me.
Well, I see one of the state experts on toll roads, Greg Holsizer, in the audience. If you want to offer. Brian, if you want to, yeah.
Sure. If I could comment in addition.
Please.
I think there's an interesting history there with the toll roads. Of course, in the Bay Area, you have the toll bridges. Yes, you have the bridges, and the Bay Area, of course, is looking at adding more high-occupancy toll lanes. There's one right now on the Sunol grade on 680, I believe. And so I think, growing acceptance to the high-occupancy toll lane concept. Los Angeles recently converted 2 highways under a pilot program, the 10 and the 110, to be high-occupancy toll lanes. And initial input on that was positive, not just on the highway, but some of the toll revenue was directed to improve transit in the corridor. The users of the highways generally were positive in surveys as well. Those that chose to use the tolled lanes appreciated the better time travel reliability. The people in the free lanes, I think, were somewhat educated through the process that it wasn't hurting them. If anything, it was benefiting them in the free lanes from making that hot lane move quicker and more efficiently, and from providing more transit options that perhaps took a little bit of pressure off the highway lanes. The administration proposed, as part of the January budget, a budget trailer bill that would expand the ability to do more pricing, such as the hot lanes, and set up more of a uniform process for this, because the current process is, in recent times, regions have determined they wanted to move forward with one of these hot lane projects, for example, and have brought forward through their elected representatives a specific bill just for that corridor. So right now we're looking at whether that could be something that would be a little, again, more uniformed, more standard, a little more streamlined, where the community and Caltrans, through their operation of the state highway system, wanted to pursue more of that.
It's definitely growing in popularity. I know in my region in San Diego, same thing. We did our own bill just so we could do Highway 15, and money off the top goes to transit first. The idea is because transit needs funding, and so there's a lot of other chunks of money that go to transit, much more than just on that summary chart. And a lot of that comes from some of these hot lane projects, or express lanes, or fast track lanes, or whatever they're called. So, Brady, thank you. Did you have anything else you wanted to add in? I know we're getting a little tight on time, so I want to keep us moving.
One last thing about tolls, that I mean, they can definitely help build and finance and maintain new and existing toll roads, route specific, but they won't generate enough money to really pay for the rest of the transportation system. So we got to kind of keep that in mind as well. But thank you.
Okay, excellent. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. So we're going to move into agenda item number 8 now, and we're very fortunate today that we have an esteemed panel of speakers to discuss the emerging technology of autonomous vehicles. And so I'd like to introduce Randy Iwasaki. He is a former Caltrans director, and he's the current executive director from the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. And he's going to kick off our panel discussion today. And I think once you see this, especially for those that are interested in the technology side, I think you'll get an understanding as to how the technology piece might work. And again, at the same time, people that don't want to embrace that can continue on, as Richard brought up at the beginning of the meeting today, as we'll get to with item 13, the manual approach is available as well. So with that, Randy, thank you very much for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation, Commissioner Medapper. I've got 3 panelists. Wherever I go and speak, if I ever get lucky enough to go outside of Contra Costa to speak, I promise my board I'd tell you a little bit about the Contra Costa Transportation Authority. So I'm going to run through this very quickly, then I'll introduce the panel. So we're the tax authority for Contra Costa. We're also the congestion management agency by law for our county in the Bay Area. We measure congestion at about 140 different intersections throughout Contra Costa to make sure that our investments are operating properly, and we try to make sure we do that on a yearly basis. These are some of the things that we invest our dollars. You heard about sales tax. It's a great discussion on transportation funding. Norm, you did a great job. I do have a chart in my back pocket, but I'm not going to bring it out right now. Ross Chittenden, who works with me at the authority, I think he drew some of that chart. Was it chart A? Chart C, yeah, table C, that's right. It's a big chart. You're going to love it when you get it. Make sure you read it the night before. So one of the things that this is what we invest in. One of the highlights is when the Benicio Martinez Bridge was built, the ferry system in Contra Costa ended. Our board recently voted yes on us expending about $45 million over 10 years to reestablish ferry service from Richmond to San Francisco, and that the ferries are being operated or ordered now. There's 2. And we're going to reestablish the maintenance facility there in Alameda. We also invest in road maintenance. I heard Steve talk a little bit about, hey, we don't fund maintenance. Well, we actually do fund maintenance. We spend a lot of money on maintenance and operations of not only our streets but our rolling stock as well. The best we can do in Contra Costa. So we make our investment as well. We also fund programs for seniors and people with disabilities. We have a pretty innovative bus program, pass program that funds underprivileged youth to make sure they have a bus pass to get to school in the morning and back home again. Measure C, that was our first measure, one of the first measures in California. It's a 20-year measure. It's expired now. It generated about $1 billion in 1988. Measure J is current right now. 71% of the voters, you have to have a supermajority, voted yes, $2.7 billion and 2004 dollars. 40% of that goes to projects. 60% goes to programs that I had listed before. Ross has taken a 25-year capital program because we bond, we don't fund, so we don't save up. We actually go out to Wall Street, sell tax-exempt municipal bonds. We bring those dollars forward. We're building a 25-year capital program in 10 years. However, because interest rates are so low, we have extra capacity now, so we're trying to invest those in future dollars to help the state of California with their transportation system in Contra Costa. These are some of the things you're going to hear talk about. Innovative transportation, telematics, I think, is the next topic. One of the things we're doing is we're trying to make in the lower left, we're trying to make our signs smart. So one of these days, that information would pipe through the infotainment system on your Nissan car. We have a future project with Nissan to make sure that information is piped right into your car infotainment system. It'll tell you how to get into the hot lane, how to get out of the hot lane, how much time did you save, and what was the tolling cost. And we're working on that. That's because in the lower right, Secretary Fox last February said all cars will be connected, and they're working on rulemaking now. City 5.0, you've heard of City 3.0 technology, trying to replace some of the services that the city's providing now. We call it City 5.0 because we like Hawaii 5.0. It sounds a lot better. So we're trying to develop a smart city, but I'm going to throw on autonomous vehicles on top of this smart city concept. Imagine a day when you have a subscription-based car service where you push a button and say, I want to ride from point A to point B with advertising. Now, that might be free, but imagine if you don't want to listen to advertising, a bunch of pitchmen trying to sell you things, pitch women, things like that. What's going to happen is you hit the other button and say, I just need to ride from point A to point B. You don't need to own a car in the future, potentially, and we're excited about that. So we're trying to do our part to make the city smarter by accelerating this automated vehicle phenomenon. I mentioned connected vehicle program. We have developed the largest secure autonomous vehicle test facility in the United States, if not the world. It's a great opportunity. Our vision is to create a hub for commercial connected vehicle, autonomous vehicle transportation innovation in Contra Costa. We call it the GoMentum Station program, where technology, innovation, and commercialization converge. Upper left-hand corner, we're trying to create smart jobs in Contra Costa. So we're 38 miles north of the Silicon Valley. We're about an hour away from Sacramento. These regulations are going to have to occur, and we think this is a great site to partner with the California Department of Motor Vehicles. Lower left, population of the great state of California is growing, as well as the United States. If you use today's technology for tomorrow's plans, you're looking at an increase in greenhouse gases. Well, what if your cars are automated? They're more efficient, upper right-hand corner, and they're safer, lower left-hand corner. You reduce congestion, and if you use a different fuel, like electric vehicles, you're going to drive that greenhouse gases down. So we're excited about that. We also have a commercial vehicle application for that, so for Eric. So we're in good shape there. So as I mentioned before, economic growth, job creation. We're starting in discussions with the governor's office to establish an iHub for the East Bay in Concord. So Dr. Rob's going to talk a little bit about this. I won't get into that, but you got the numbers. There's a lot of crashes. We're trying to avoid those crashes, which will reduce congestion in the future. Talking about efficient mobility, there's many, many options. We're trying to provide connections to bikes and trails and things like that, so you can bike, you can walk. Healthier environment, reduce greenhouse gases. So here's the site. This is about 7 miles long, 1.2 miles wide. San Francisco, in perspective, is 49 square miles, 7 by 7. This is about a fifth the size. So it's 5,000 acres. We have a license to test on 2,100 of those acres. Oops. Where is it? That's kind of the picture. So we have tunnels, we have railroad crossings, things that you're going to need to test. We have a spine road that's about 7 miles long. We're looking at Peloton. They're a truck platooning new technology firm to test out there. These are the things that we're going to make an application to USDOT's broad agency announcement. Those are the 10 items. We have commercial vehicle and transit. We have pedestrian interface, transit interface, hot lane, integrated corridor management, advanced traffic signal systems. But inside that blue, that's the test facility. That's where the secure testing occurs. It's very difficult to predict the future, right? That's what Yogi Berra said, and I love Star Trek, so we just threw that up there as well. So we're going to invite you on the 31st, Tuesday. We're going to have a great keynote speaker. I really appreciate that, Commissioner. Thank you very much for bailing me out. On the 31st, and it's going to be in Concord, California at the Concord Hilton. If you need information, sign up, come to the door. It's going to be a very good event, and thank you. So that's my presentation. I did what I said I'd do for my board. So Andrew Conway is going to be the first speaker with DMV. He's the Chief of Registration, Policy, and Automation at the California Department of Motor Vehicles, overseeing policy matters and business rules for DMV's field operations and driver safety programs. So he'll talk a little bit about regulations. Then we have Paul Godsmark from, I'm half Canadian, by the way, so he's my Canadian brother. Paul is one of the founders of the Canadian Autonomous Vehicle Center of Excellence. He's a civil engineer. He's an expert at roadway design. So he's on the panel as well. And he's going to give you a glimpse of the future. And then Dr. Rob Bertini, Dr. Rob, I call him, known him for a long time. He used to be the executive director at the University Transportation Center in Portland, Oregon. He was part of the team that started up the road user charge process in Oregon. Then he was appointed as the Deputy Administrator for RITA, Research, Innovation, and Technology Administration, under President Obama. And then he came to my alma mater, Cal Poly, so that's why he's on the panel. So I got a half Canadian brother, and I've got my Cal Poly professor on board, Dr. Rob. So
Go
these
Mustangs.
Guys, go Mustangs, that's
There
right.
you go.
And we did make the 64 last year, but it just did not pan out to the national championship. But, so we're going to get started. We only have an hour, I guess. So, Andrew, you want to kick this off? You can sit there. You want to go?
Probably do it from the podium so the camera could catch you. That'd be better. Thanks.
That's a reason not to. Thank you for having me. My name is Andrew Conway from the Department of Motor Vehicles. Usually Dr. Bernard Soriano makes this presentation, and he sends his regrets that he couldn't be here today. SB 1298 ordered the department to undertake a rulemaking to allow for the testing and the development of autonomous technology in vehicles in California. Two things that we were asked to do. One was to establish a regimen by which people could be, or entities could be authorized to test vehicles on our roads. And then second, they asked us to develop a set of rules regarding the eventual deployment of these in the public for sale and regular use. And so those are the two packages that we put forward in terms of rulemaking, or were tasked with. The statute also defined an autonomous vehicle, and I think this is really interesting because it helps educate you to the idea that there are a number of independent systems in a vehicle that you see in vehicles today: blind spot avoidance systems, automatic emergency braking systems, parking assist, self-parking vehicles, adaptive cruise control. All of these elements go into what makes a vehicle an autonomous vehicle, but individually they're already largely available in vehicles today, and in themselves they do not make a vehicle autonomous. An autonomous vehicle is something that sort of creates some sort of synthesis of all of those things and takes over control of the vehicle in the place of a human operator. That's when you achieve autonomy of the vehicle. We formulated a statewide steering committee to guide us in the development of our regulations. A number of regular players in the area at the state and federal level have all participated in guiding us in the development of these regulations, giving us feedback, giving us insight from their unique perspectives. And as you can see, NHTSA, the department itself, the California Highway Patrol, Caltrans, Department of Insurance, and our transportation agency. Our first regulatory package was effective this past fall. We had 2 pre-notice workshops, a comment period, all of the typical rulemaking procedures were followed, and we developed a set of regulations that describe for people what's necessary for a company to test vehicles in California and what's necessary for them to have qualified drivers and qualified vehicles. In summary, there's a $5 million insurance requirement that was established in the statute. There are standards established for who can be testing an autonomous vehicle. We require basically what the Department of Insurance defines as a good driver under California insurance rules, was sort of the baseline for what you would need to be to drive an autonomous vehicle on our roads. We expect each company to have a test driver training program, and we limit the use of drivers to employees, contractors, or designees. There's a lot of concern about who would be behind the wheel of one of these vehicles if they need to take over control. They have to be seated in the driver's seat. There has to be a driver's seat. They have to report any accidents to us, report any unanticipated disengagements, and they have to renew their permits annually. So we look to the testing community to give us feedback about what's going on the roads as a condition of having their testing permit. We did exclude certain vehicles. We call them CVRA vehicles. They're vehicles with a gross vehicle weight over 10,000 pounds. We also don't allow motorcycles, though that would be really cool. And we don't allow commercial vehicles. We're not allowing pickup trucks, anything that would meet the definition of requiring a commercial license plate. As a result, after those regulations went into effect, we had 8 companies become licensed testers. I think it's interesting to note that 2 of them are OEM suppliers, Bosch and Delphi, and one is not involved in the vehicle business to date at all, and that's Google. The interesting thing about this, I think, is it gives you a path to, or a way to see the different paths that are being taken to develop this technology. Bosch and Delphi are really not interested in ever selling a vehicle themselves, so we see them as developing systems that will probably be available broadly in the automotive market, and the others are looking to just, I think, from a competitive standpoint, following traditional development paths. Package 2 is a much more difficult where the rubber meets the road literally thing, because package 2 of our regulations is about public sale and use of autonomous vehicles in California. We have a contract with UC Berkeley for recommendations. They have been giving us, there's a lot of research going on globally. They have helped us corral that research and some of that thinking. We had a pre-notice workshop this month with the manufacturing industry. And we got a lot of comment about the traditional methods by which vehicles are certified to be safe, which was, like transportation funding, a very eye-opening experience to understand that much of the safety in our community is self-certified. Crash testing is sort of a post-manufacturing process by which the federal government's involved. And it was a very eye-opening education for me. We've had a formal public hearing. And we're now tasked with a regulations package that will assign violations, define who is the operator of a vehicle when nobody is actually in control of the vehicle, place restrictions on the operation and deployment of these vehicles because they're not safe in all environments, in all areas, and any licensing requirements that might be imposed upon the owner of one of these vehicles seeking to operate them. We have a number of things that we have to summarize in these regulations. We have to specify if a vehicle is capable of operating without someone inside. There are provisions in the original statute that sort of account for the idea that some of these vehicles could be operating without someone behind the wheel, or if there's a wheel. We have to disclose designated areas of operation, functional safety requirements, sensor data recording. These vehicles will be equipped with black boxes, much like an airplane is, or some vehicles are today. But the 30 seconds of data prior to a collision is something that the industry is really grappling with, I know. And that's about it, I think. We've also done, I think, sort of in line with what you're doing with road use charge ideas for outreach, we've done a significant amount of outreach. We found that this is an issue that creates an awful lot of buzz and a lot of interest. Far more attention is paid to it, I think, than maybe is necessary, but it catches people's eye. And again, one of the things I think is really important about that is when you talk about linking road use charge just in a discussion standpoint with autonomous vehicles, this is a vehicle that grabs people. When you talk about autonomous vehicles, they pay attention, and there are other subjects that you can talk about, other things that the technology creates an opportunity for that can be brought into the conversation in a way that's really sort of engaging with people. People find this an exciting topic, and it's a good opportunity, I think, to talk about other things as well. That's basically all I have as a presentation. I'm also here, of course, to answer questions, but I think, are we going to move to the...
No, let's just keep it on going, and then we'll get
Yes.
you guys all as a group. Thank you very much, Andrew. Very good. Now Paul is up next.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, committee members. So, autonomous vehicles, are we ready? And I want to ask a question to everyone, not just this technical committee, but all of the committees and meetings you're in. Is there an elephant in the room, and is it autonomous vehicles? So the question, are we ready for the arrival of autonomous vehicles? And my answer is an emphatic no, I don't believe we are. Why do I say that? They're going to be here soon. There are going to be huge socio-economic impacts. It's going to affect all aspects of our daily lives. It's not in our future plans, and it is potentially disruptive. So here soon, the automakers are saying they'll have highly automated vehicles sometime around 2020 with potentially fully self-driving by 2025. Google, out of left field, a technology company, is saying they're going to have their technology in public hands by 2017 to 2020. And at Cavco, we estimate that there's going to come a tipping point sometime around 2026. And for California, I actually now think that's a conservative estimate. Very brief history of the modern development of autonomous vehicles. In 2007, the DARPA Urban Challenge was won the first year they won it by Carnegie Mellon Racing, Tartan Racing, and a number of other teams successfully completed the course. 2008, one of those members of the DARPA teams, Anthony Lewandowski, who's now with Google, he drove his Pribot, delivered a pizza across the San Francisco Bay Bridge. 2010, Audi ran their Pikes Peak vehicle up that challenge run. 2011, because this technology has been developed in 16 countries around the world at least. 2011, Autonomous Labs drove their vehicle around the streets of Berlin. 2013, the VisLab Brave vehicle drove around the streets of Parma in Italy. 2013, Mercedes-Benz recreated the Bertha-Benz road trip on German roads. First commercially autonomous vehicle became available in 2014, January of that year. Electric, 12 mile an hour, the Induct Navia. I don't think this is going to change the world, but it's a precursor of what's to come. 2014, Google announced that they're mastering city street driving. They've done 700,000 miles at that point. They're dealing with cyclists and their signals. They're dealing with construction zones. In 2014, Google revealed their first and second version of their prototype neighborhood electric vehicle. This is capable of doing up to 25 mile an hour, and we anticipate that they're going to start a pilot project sometime, possibly within the next few months, with up to maybe 150 vehicles in California. In Sweden, Volvo have commenced the Drive Me project in 2014, where they have 100 increasingly autonomous vehicles on the roads of Gothenburg. This year, Elon Musk and Tesla have basically said their vehicle is going to be capable of going from on-ramp to off-ramp autonomously. Mercedes-Benz unveiled their concept car, the F015, at the CES Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas in January. Nissan have basically said they're going to have a range of commercially viable autonomous vehicles on the road sometime between 2020 and 2025. Mercedes-Benz future truck, they believe that they will have a highly automated, if not self-driving truck available in 2025. And so I'm saying this technology is coming like a freight train. If we're ready, great, and if we're not tough, it's coming anyway. So estimated timeline and tipping point. Some of my thinking would become more obvious through the rest of the presentation. But with the way autonomous vehicles, connected vehicles are going, I believe that sometime around 2026 there will be sufficient work being done on the road network by autonomous vehicles that it is obvious to everyone of their advantages, of their benefits, and why manual driving, its days are numbered. So in terms of huge impacts, currently 34,000 deaths a year on US roads. Autonomous vehicles could potentially save in excess of 80% of those. That would be 27,000 lives a year saved. Currently we're slaves to the driving task. If we're no longer slaves, we could free up to 5.5 billion hours in the US. The shared transportation as a service concept, I'll speak a lot more of that in a minute. Morgan Stanley estimated that the US could save $1.3 trillion a year once autonomous vehicles are fully deployed. That's nearly 8% of GDP. And at Cavco, we estimate that the money flows around autonomous vehicles could be in excess of 20% of GDP. That's not just new business models, that's business models that are disrupted, that's changes in asset values, such as land values, which will be massively impacted. So currently, I'm a visitor to the city. I come in, and there are various options on how I can get transportation. There's car share taxis, car rentals, ride share, transportation network companies. That's Uber, Lyft, Sidecar. But what the autonomous vehicle does is all those business models at the moment are very identifiable, very easy to distinguish. But once the autonomous vehicle comes along, then all of those business models begin to look the same, because what you will do is you'll have your smart device, you'll call up the vehicle that you want, you'll pay electronically, the vehicle will arrive, it will take you where you want to go, you off-hire it, and it goes on to someone else. And each of those business models benefits from using autonomous vehicles, and they lose market share if they don't have it. So there's going to be a big rush to get into autonomous vehicles. And then, of course, you've got the entrepreneurs. An average college student at the moment, they'll maybe buy a car and it'll sit idle, depreciating 95% of the time. Why would they not buy an autonomous vehicle, hire it out through the cloud when they're not using it, and at the end of their 4-year course, they've not only recouped their transportation costs, they might even be making a profit. So competition in the transportation as a service area is going to be brutal. And then, of course, there's I call them the forgotten 30%. These are the people that are not well served by the current road transportation network. There are many that are disabled, seniors, young, poor, medically at risk, who are unable to gain easy, reliable access of affordable transportation, road transportation at the moment, that the shared automated taxis will greatly enhance. If this happens, we're going to see incredible modal shift. The current public transit network, it's a fixed route, fixed schedule system. The autonomous shared autonomous taxis, they're an on-demand, point-to-point service. And we're going to see modal shift, particularly from buses, maybe from light rail transit, possibly from mass transit. Now, if we continue with average vehicle occupancy as it is, which is about 1.2, then we're going to get massive congestion. We're just going to get more vehicles on the road. But here the benefits are, if we use shared automated taxis, if we put policies in place to promote that, then we can actually not only deal with the induced demand from the additional 30% of people without ready access to transportation, we can actually reduce congestion on the roads whilst transporting more people. So this is going to affect all aspects of daily life, and I've got a picture here of a typical street scene, I don't know, 150, 200 years ago, and then look how it's changed with a modern motor car. And autonomous vehicles will change how and where we live and work. So I'm asking, do our plans and forecasts for 15 years out allow for sprawl? What if our working day can start when we get in the car and it stops when we get out of the car? How much further will people live away from the cities for affordable housing? But then we get densification. If we no longer need parking in our urban centres, then we can put developments in, we can put more housing, we can put more jobs in. So we can get both sprawl and densification. And as we move from the ownership to the TAS, the Transportation as a Service model, then users will save approximately 40% a year of their average transportation costs by not owning a vehicle. And one autonomous vehicle typically replaces anywhere between 2 and 13 private vehicles. So the work on the network that these vehicles do should not be judged by the vehicles sold, it should be judged by the work being done and how many vehicles they replace. As I said, it's not in our future plans, it's not in our transportation plans, municipal, parking, transit, fleet replacement, trucking, high-speed rail, government departments, pensions. It's not in our road user charging plans. There are no standards or guidelines to guide us. And it is worth noticing that in the last few weeks, in the UK, the Parliamentary Transportation Select Committee have just made a recommendation to the UK Cabinet that there be a Cabinet Minister for driverless vehicles in the UK. That's how seriously they're taking it. I believe that we're going to get new social norms, behaviours and business models. Why wouldn't we have mobile autonomous vehicle offices? Why would I pay high downtown rents when I can just be sitting in my office doing work and it can take me to meet clients, it can take me to meetings? Why would I want to own a home when I could, I joke that I'm going to retire to a pimped out RV and tour North America following the weather, and that there are going to be nomadic travelling communities, like-minded people like me, just doing the same thing. You know, why do you want to pay land tax and everything else when you don't have to? Retailers and services are going to start coming to us. You know, we're already seeing it happen. Amazon have just filed a patent so that their 3D printers can be in a truck and they're going to be printing the item we want on the way to us. Freight logistics is going to be completely revolutionised. And autonomous bicycles, I kid you not, Google's equivalent, Baidu in China, are currently developing an autonomous bicycle. It will deliver itself to us. We will use it. When we off-hire it, it'll just go and find the next user. And sidewalk-friendly deliverbots, there's been a lot of talk about drone deliveries, but it's going to be much easier to have sidewalk-friendly autonomous vehicles delivering your pizza, suitcase-sized things. One concept that you may not have ever heard of before, but I think is very relevant to California, autonomous friendly corridors. Once trucks are automated, the cost of operating the truck can reduce by about 40% once the driver is removed. We can also, because we avoid working time regulations, use these vehicles 40% more. And the Central North America Trade Corridor Association, CONACTA, have basically come up with this concept all the way from Mexico up through Central North America to Canada, this autonomous friendly corridor that would be for trucks and even drones. My suggestion is that California in particular should be very interested in the West Coast version of this, and if so, because it will generate a great deal of trade and economic growth, and border crossings is actually key to get this working. Autonomous vehicle zones is another concept that you may never have heard of before, but the Mayor of LA, Eric Garcetti, has already said that he wants LA to be the first major city in the world with a driverless car neighborhood. And the idea being that we can wait decades for attrition to get rid of the human driver off the road, but if we put policies in place to restrict human drivers, then we capture the full benefits of autonomous vehicles at the earliest opportunity. This will improve the quality of life in our cities. We can promote walkability and active transportation, and it's very equitable because we begin to include the forgotten 30%. And this concept is being already discussed in LA, Singapore and Helsinki. So almost all jurisdictions have 30-year or similar length transportation plans and forecasts, and if I'm correct with my estimate of the tipping point of 2026, already the majority of the period of those plans is the autonomous vehicle is going to be ubiquitous and mainstream. So none of our municipal policies and plans account for this technology, even where it's being birthed in the San Francisco, the Bay Area plan. They have a picture of the Google autonomous vehicle and a comment that planners will be watching with keen interest in years to come. And the eyes of the world are on California and how it leads in guidance and regulations. And to be honest, we don't know enough to give a good lead. We're struggling everywhere in the world. No one's talking about autonomous vehicles in their plans. Apart from the Californian operational laws, we don't have any policies, laws, regulations, standard guidelines or codes of practice to guide us. You go to any engineer, any transportation engineer or planner and ask them about autonomous vehicles, they'll leaf through their standards and they go, well, it's not in here. But autonomous vehicles are already well within our planning time frame. And I should just point out on major infrastructure projects, be aware that under the environmental impacts statement requirements, autonomous vehicles should possibly already be being considered as an alternative solution, and there's a potential legal challenge if they're not being. I won't mention any more about Contra Costa and the Go-Mentum, because Randy already mentioned that. So essentially to summarise, there's going to be huge benefits. It's going to be transformational. This is potentially the first paradigm shift on our roads for 150 years since the modern motor car was invented. It's going to result in loads of new business models and opportunities. The downsides, it's a very technically very formidable challenge to achieve fully self-driving vehicles. Safety is absolutely paramount. Job displacement could be quite intense. There are privacy issues. I'm very worried about obesity. We already probably don't walk enough, and if we have an on-demand point-to-point transportation service, things could get worse. It's very disruptive, brings a lot of change, autonomous vehicles. So I'm suggesting that we need good policies, we need to do our due diligence. CAVCO wrote a paper with the Conference Board of Canada and the Van Horn Institute in Canada, and we're recommending that all infrastructure projects have an AV audit, that the autonomous vehicles are included as a hazard and better understood before we commit funds and money to projects that could be impacted. And if we plan properly, we can maximise the benefits and mitigate the downsides. And I would say, even though the technology isn't real yet, I would suggest it's better to be over-prepared and plan for this now, otherwise there's significant and unnecessary socio-economic collateral damage that could occur. Okay, and on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Paul, for that. All right, Robert Bertini from Cal Poly.
Great, thank you very much. I'm not sure. Is anyone controlling the laptop?
he's over there.
Okay. There you are.
Well, we see it on the screen in front of. There you
Okay.
go. There it
Thank
is.
you very. Yeah. Thank you
All
very
right.
much for the opportunity to speak before you today. I know that you have a big challenge in front of you, but I think it's also exciting. Just to maybe step back for a second, what we're dealing with in transportation from a national perspective is certainly still an unacceptable number of fatalities and injuries and crashes. We're still dealing with accessibility and mobility challenges, as well as reliability, which is becoming more of a topic that I think people are understanding in terms of their travel time from day to day. And also just the cost of transportation for households. In terms of the environment, roughly transportation accounts for about 1/3 of our emissions and energy consumption, so there's still a big challenge that we have in transportation to make reductions in those areas. When we talk about greenhouse gas reductions, some people like 3-legged stools or 4-legged stools. I usually talk about a 5-legged stool because I like to include, in addition to the vehicles and the fuel and reducing VMT, also system operations and as well as agency operations. As you've heard already, and as you probably know, the intelligent vehicle is here. Just as an example, this is the 2014 Ford Focus, which is at the relatively affordable end of the vehicle pricing spectrum, where a number of applications, including adaptive cruise control, blind spot warning, rear view camera, lane keeping, parking assist, traffic sign recognition, etc. So these little modules already are available and on the market in many vehicles. And so the interesting challenge is what happens when more and more of our fleet begins to incorporate these technologies, and then what happens when these applications begin to be stitched together. One thing already that Professor Wax mentioned, I should mention that he was my professor at UC Berkeley as well, full disclosure. So we are in a data revolution. Many of you already know this, but I think it's important to mention that in the transportation sector, we've gone from what I usually call a desert to an ocean, where it used to be very difficult and costly to collect data. Now the problem is we've got so much data flowing. How do we manage it? And then how do we extract the useful information? How do we merge data sources in order to get at what we really want to understand about the transportation system? So I think the road user program as an opportunity for understanding where and when and how people are traveling is really exciting. I'd like to talk a little bit about connected vehicles, just to give you a quick picture. We launched this program when I was at the US DOT as a research program in 2009, and the idea with the connected vehicle is that vehicles are connected to one another and with the infrastructure, but also including wireless devices that users may be carrying with them. We broadened the program from just focusing on passenger cars to include fleet vehicles such as taxis, buses, commercial vehicles, and we also expanded our stakeholder group internally at the U.S. Department of Transportation to include the Federal Railroad Administration. Obviously, railroad grade crossings are an important node on the network where we can improve safety, as well as MARAD, the Maritime Administration, for improving connectivity and communications in real time at port and in port locations. And the idea is with connected vehicles, and I'll say a little bit more about what I mean by that. The idea and the reason that we're in the middle of a regulatory process now at NHTSA is that research has indicated that about 80% of unimpaired crashes could be reduced or minimized or prevented with connected vehicle technology. That translates to about 50% of all crashes. So we would go, if we deployed this, from 6 million crashes to 3 million crashes per year, which is extremely significant. Those crashes that I just mentioned, there are really about 6 crash types that account for 80% of the unimpaired crashes, as shown here, from rear-end warning, lane departure. And these are the applications that have been demonstrated that would address those crashes. In Michigan, over the last several years, there was a pilot deployment of this technology. At the international level, on the right-hand side here, the basic message that the vehicles are communicating to one another and to the infrastructure has already been standardized. So that's in place internationally. Another thing that we launched when I was at the USDOT was collaboration with Europe and Japan and Korea to make sure that the auto industries in all of our countries, all of our regions, were in sync with one another. The communication mechanism is called DSRC, so I don't want to give you a whole lecture on DSRC, but I want you to know that that stands for Dedicated Short Range Communications. It's a robust form of Wi-Fi that many of us use, and it allows basically the communications to occur up to 10 times per second, which is really important if you're trying to avoid crashes. If two vehicles are traveling toward one another at 60 miles per hour, you need that rapid, reliable communication to happen so that they can take action to avoid the crash. And the key thing about DSRC, it's actually in the news the last few days that that is a part of the spectrum that has been allocated by Congress for transportation safety purposes. And there is a movement afoot. There has been a movement afoot for a while from the telecommunication industry to kind of step on this piece of the spectrum. So I think it's important to be aware of that issue. And so DSRC, you could come to Cal Poly and take my class, I guess, if you want to learn more about it. But the idea is it's complementary to all other forms of wireless communication. So safety-critical purposes, this form of communication is important. Other forms for convenience-type applications, informational-type applications, even eco-driving kinds of applications, the DSRC would be perfectly compatible with other forms of Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and so on. I mentioned the safety pilot. There were about 3,000 vehicles in Ann Arbor, Michigan over a several-year period that helped NHTSA decide basically to begin a regulatory process. It's anticipated that next year, 2016, all new vehicles will be required to have DSRC devices on board. And in my view, that's any vehicle that's regulated under the FMVSS, which is the federal safety standard, which likely would also be any vehicle that is partially or fully automated as well. So in a sense, the movement here is such that all vehicles, including automated vehicles, will be connected. And in fact, as far as I understand, the vehicles that are used now are connected and are pulling map data in addition to extracting data from their onboard sensors. They're pulling map data through that connectivity as well. So at the USDOT, there are a bunch of programs that are underway. Randy mentioned an application to the USDOT's Connected Vehicle Pilot Program. There are a number of applications that are envisioned in terms of making the transportation system more efficient through traveler information, traffic management, advanced traffic signal operations, taking advantage of this connectivity that would be in place as a baseline for safety purposes. And at the heart of that is this the fact that there will be all this data available from vehicles and from the infrastructure as well. There's also an environmental focused program at the USDOT called ARIS that is looking at deployments of a number of environmentally related applications as well, reducing emissions and so on. The path to deployment, we're pretty far along that path. The Federal Highway Administration is working on basically speccing out the roadside hardware that is needed for these connected vehicle applications. And AASHTO, the American Association of State Highway and Transportation Officials, has developed what they've called a footprint analysis, and I'm sure that your staff are aware of the fee payment aspect that AASHTO has spec'd out in their documentation that is showing how the connected vehicle system could enable or complement existing fee payment systems. So they've laid out in detail what would be necessary on the roadside and in the vehicles to make those possible. So this is just indicating that fee payment footprint that you may want to take a look at. Something just to sort of bring us to bring autonomy and connectivity together. I see it as the two technologies being complementary. So rather than an either or, I see it as an and. And so if you look at this graph here, we have cooperation or connectivity across the bottom, and then autonomy on the vertical side. So we're making progress in both dimensions, and so you might say that on the lower left-hand side, we've got automated systems available on vehicles now. The U.S. DOT Safety Pilot was not necessarily incorporating automation components, so that's the lower right. The Google cars and the automated vehicles that are being tested now are not relying on any sort of connectivity, but what you might say is that in the upper right-hand corner could be the future sweet spot where we take advantage of all these technologies and bring them all together. And I guess that's the interesting challenge. We're not going to flip a switch and change all the vehicles that are out on the roadway. It's going to be a long transition, and the interesting challenge is how do we get all these pieces to work together, this big puzzle. Speaking of the puzzle, I guess there are a lot of issues, and you're grappling with some of them here, and the rest of us across the country and around the world are looking at a lot of these issues: liability, privacy, how we manage the data, who manages the data, how these systems are governed, what legislation is needed, how do we actually encourage or enhance the rollout through deployment, and then how do we make these systems sustainable. So I would say there is a lot of talk and interest and maybe a little bit of hype about automated vehicles. And I would just say, and I recently checked in LexisNexis just to see the number of news articles and technical papers that are being published, and it is growing a lot over the last few years. And I would just say to take a little phrase. I think Brian Taylor is from UCLA. I sort of borrowed this philosophy in the first bullet, is we need to think about designing places where people want to be. And I do think that despite increasing amounts of automation and innovation, I think people are still going to want to interact with one another as humans face to face. And so we aren't, I think, going too far with what we think about is going to happen with automated vehicles, where everyone is going to be in their vehicle 24 hours a day. Sorry, Paul, I don't know about living in an automated vehicle, but you never know. But I guess as public officials and as people interested in transportation, we want to make sure that we remember that there are people involved here, and it's not only the technology, and transportation is not an end in and of itself. So with that, I think we're open to some questions, and just want to thank you again for your attention.
Well, thank you very much, Robert, for that. So the task force has just had an opportunity to really look into the future here, and really with Randy's comments, Andrew from DMV, Paul, your presentation and your perspective, and then Robert, thank you very much. So Randy, why don't you field some questions either from the audience or members of the task force. Let's start with the committee. Any members of the committee? Stephen?
There we go. Two quick questions. One for Andrew from the DMV. You mentioned self-certification as sort of the dominant model of safety testing. I know there's been some calls for a different model for self-driving cars with software testing and third-party testing before the fact. Do you know where that's going to end up?
Not really, because that's part of the rulemaking that will be set out to do. But we've tried to research the viability of a third-party program. We've put out an RFI requesting information. We found a couple of responses. There is a third-party certification system in place in Europe to some extent. One of the responses that we got back from the industry, almost with unanimity, was this idea that if they're not engaged at the initial onset of the development, you can't really engage a third party, say, this late, as late at the game as it is now, even though I would consider it quite early. And so that's part of the rub, is finding that certification and then creating something that might actually be quite different from where third parties come in today, which is much earlier in the process than they would in this case.
Thanks. And then just the one last question for Paul, I think. You mentioned a tipping point in 2026. Given the lifespan of vehicles and the transition of the fleet and whatnot, when do you see self-driving cars making up a noticeable amount of the fleet? I'm assuming it's after that.
It's as I tried to communicate. Try not to think of it as number of vehicles in the fleet. Think of it as the work being done. So, for instance, at the moment, 2% of the American vehicle fleet is actually in-fleet vehicles, be it taxis, be it car rental, car share, ride share. If all of those 2% of the vehicles were doing the work of 6 private vehicles, they would be doing 12% of the work on the roads. and that would be very noticeable. And so the 2026 tipping point that I'm talking about is when at least 10% of the work on the road is being done by the autonomous vehicles, and that may only need less than 2% of the vehicle fleet.
Okay. I want to take a moment to welcome the chair of the California Transportation Commission, Lucy Dunn. So thank you very much, my colleague on the CTC, joining us here. Lee, you had a question? Comment?
Yeah, I'm glad everybody noted that there were privacy and security issues in this whole area of both autonomous vehicles and connected cars. And my organization was concerned with when we reviewed the ANPRM that NHTSA put out last August. We were dismayed to see how much that rulemaking attempted to defer questions about privacy and security with just in the V2V sphere, and we're not even in the autonomous vehicle area yet. And this is even after it's been clearly demonstrated by researchers like Stefan Savage and Yoshi Kono at UC San Diego and University of Washington that modern cars are rife with exploitable security vulnerabilities. And those kinds of vulnerabilities are things that it's not clear to me that in the current automobile industry that it's easy to deal with. We're talking about self-certification, we're talking about testing, but my understanding from speaking to the researchers is the problem for a lot of manufacturers, they're buying parts with embedded computing in them from many different vendors, so they are assembling to a large extent from suppliers around the world with proprietary code, which may be itself protected by various kinds of formats and or access control devices, which then make it difficult for, say, the final assembler to even vet the security, much less put together a good security threat model for the entire vehicle. So that makes me a little more skeptical, or at least cynical about how this is all going to work, because you are at the same time talking, when you put V2V connected cars and AV together, you're talking both about wanting to have a secure vehicle, but at the same time opening up to a lot of different communications, and we've just seen this throughout the IT industry that when a device on its own is one security question, and a device that is constantly receiving input and could have buffer overflows or all sorts of other kinds of bugs in it are another. So I was wondering if you feel that at least the national effort has really paid enough attention to this issue, especially after Senator Markey's report about how the vendors were having difficulty with evaluating security.
Dr. Robb, you want to take that one?
I guess I could give a one-word answer and say no. So there are a lot of gaps and a lot of issues. The whole data piece, who owns it, who manages it, who makes pieces of it available for different purposes. I think in general in transportation we're pretty solid with privacy, where agencies such as Caltrans, who have implemented tolling systems, there are firewalls and 99.99% guarantees of privacy, and so I think that's a long-standing tradition for the last 20 or 30 years in tolling, for example. So I think we're pretty solid in privacy. I think, on the other hand, vehicle manufacturers, they're not going to sell products that they don't feel are safe. I think a national conversation that could perhaps begin in California about these issues would be very important. So I do think that there are gaps and opportunities to bring people to the table to resolve the jigsaw puzzle I put up there. Most of those things are not resolved, and most of the parties, many of the parties, need to be at the table and figuring these things out. And I know from my experience at the USDOT that the agencies there are open to this kind of discussion and figuring out how to begin checking off some of those topics off the list.
One of the partners at our test facility, so we have a number of partners, and we're going to announce our second major OEM partner on the 31st. We also are dealing with the insurance companies. They're trying to figure out how they play in this connected autonomous vehicle program. But also we have cybersecurity. We're trying to get somebody on board that has experience on a military level of protecting the bases. And so there's a partner that we have identified to see if they want to join this effort to figure out how do you safeguard this information and make sure that nobody hacks into these vehicles in the future.
Well, and that's actually sort of a flip side of it's a problem with two sides because, I am not a mechanical person. But there are a lot of people whose relationship to their cars and vehicles is one where they want to mod it, tinker with it, play with it. And one of the concerns that we at EFF have is that when you, think about things from a security perspective, you're going to want to close off people's access to things. Whereas if you think about things from a user's perspective, they're going to want access to the innards of their device, the same way that I want to be able to, the many hobbyists, the entire computer age began because people were able to take the computers they had and play with them and innovate with them. So there's at one level, I think there's an issue of what is how are those kinds of precautions and safeguards going to actually impact the ability of, say, an owner or a driver or a user to actually know what information is being collected about them, what information is being transmitted somewhere about their driving habits, whether or not they'll be able to even, if we are in a model, which is not quite the same as Paul's, because Paul's more into the shared sort of, but if I personally own a vehicle, I feel like I should be able to know what it's saying about me or how it is working. And we've seen already with the electronification of cars that has also some interesting effects in the aftermarket, in the vendors may have incentives to make interfaces proprietary to make it more difficult for competitors or for mechanics to even be able to repair the car. So there's a whole host of issues on the usability and sort of user side of things that end up getting tied in with the security issue.
Well, and I think this is a whole fascinating conversation that obviously we could probably do the rest of the day on. And, Paul, you bring to the table something that, as Lee was just alluding to, your comment and one of your theses, at least from my perspective, was there's going to be more people driving, but with fewer cars, because that one particular car is going to be working constantly. This time it might be driving somebody from point A to point B, and then 5 minutes later it's taking somebody else through the car sharing model. And, looking through your lens into the future, that's, again, one of the reasons why it ties back technologically on the road charge model, which I think makes a lot of sense. And I have to say, Andrew, having you from DMV, very important, and your presentation was outstanding. I know, and Mayor, just so you know, Andrew's one of the target people I'd love to have on your work group, so maybe you two can connect. Thank you. He's a yes. Thank you very much. That's outstanding. See how fast we work on that. Stephen, did you want to provide some concluding comments? And then we're going to jump into telematics with Eshwar and still try to break for lunch by noon.
Yeah, just real quick, and not to take too much time, but I wanted to thank Lee for bringing up some important points, and it really brings full circle the presentation we heard and the connections to all of what we need to be doing in the future. And there's a lot of opportunities with technology to move forward on these road charge issues, but privacy issues, security issues, data access and control, are vitally important. So we don't need to talk more about it now, but I think it is something that's going to constantly pop up in different ways, and it's vitally important.
And Randy, thank you for once again providing us a glimpse into the future as you so well, and our panelists. Thank you very much for being here. It's really. So we'll move right into agenda item number 9, and we again it kind of follows the same theme, and this being telematics. And Eshwar Pinappalli, I'll let you let everybody know about what you do in your day job and how it ties into automotive telematics. Microphone.
Oh,
there you go.
For the record, my name is Ishwar Pirampalli, and I'm from Open Mobile Alliance, also known as OMA. Prior to joining OMA, I was with Bell Labs for 29 years and doing research in wireless arena. And I was also on the faculty of University of Portland and University of Oklahoma. Just wondered. So OMA is a nonprofit organization. It is an alliance of leading global telecommunications service providers and infrastructure vendors, IT suppliers, and mobile vendors. My presentation includes a primer for automotive telematics, followed by what features are currently being offered or planned to be offered by auto OEMs or auto manufacturers in the near and immediate future. All content in this presentation is public information, so there is no confidentiality or proprietary in terms of the content. And my projection of services, future services, are for thought-provoking purposes only. The objective of this visual is to indicate the topics that I'll be talking about in the next few minutes. These topics include data acquisition system, DAS, global positioning system, GPS, and identify some of the features that could be provided by automotive telematics today and tomorrow. I will identify a potential privacy breach that's possible, just one potential breach that could be possible. I will mention one technology by name, which is Fast Track, and there's a similar technology in Northeast called Easy Pass, so which is all same technology that's currently being used. And this is the technology I want to emphasize or re-emphasize, that is this system or the technology is well proven, well deployed, well accepted, and well supported both in the front end and in the back end. So I think that this technology has quite a bit of applicability for future deployments or future extensions of its use. Actually, this presentation should have been prior to the previous one because this is the primer. So telematics, this is the tele stands for distance, and also for the first two syllables of telecommunications. The word informatics means it's science of processing the data for storage and retrieval. Data acquisition system is the process of measuring real-world physical conditions and conveying to a system for processing. Some of the elements that are read and are conveyed for processing from the automotive point of view are under the hood conditions in an automotive, within auto environment. When I say within auto environment, inside the auto environment, and outside the auto environment could be your weather conditions or road conditions, and also the other surrounding environment conditions could include humidity, rainfall, traffic flow, etc. Global positioning system is a worldwide radio navigation system formed from a constellation of 24 satellites and their ground stations. GPS uses these 24 satellites as the reference points to calculate positions accurate to matter of meters. Positioning technology has further evolved into a measure of sub-meter level. In a sense, it's like giving every square meter on the planet a unique address. So some of the real-world GPS applications include where am I going, how do I go from point A to point B, and etc. There is a reference at the bottom, so if you want more information, just click that link and it'll give you more information. The previous presentation included some of these automotive needs for today and tomorrow. I'll be focusing a little more on tomorrow's needs. And so today, the connectivity convenience is of primary importance. That's all we are trying to do at this point. So you get into your vehicle, and your mobile is getting connected to the dashboard, and after that, it's possible that dashboard will take over the functions of a mobile. So this way, you don't have to look at your mobile or play with your mobile once you get into your car. That's the connectivity convenience. And tomorrow's features or needs could include enhanced telematics services, location technology, and autonomous or intelligent driving. I think there was a lot of discussion on autonomous and intelligent driving. Now, I'll just take one step more into the future, and with that step, I want to say that with embedded SIM, that means that your dashboard of an automobile also will have a SIM card, just like you have on your mobile. So what it means is that within next few years, I foresee that automobile becoming a member of your family share data plan. So just right now, you may have a data plan which is called family share, where you would have 3 mobiles or 4 mobiles sharing the same data plan. And tomorrow, I predict your automobile is going to be part of your family data plan. The automotive needs today, these were already discussed, so I'm going to skip this slide, but if you want more information, go to the reference I'm indicating at the bottom of the visual. Tomorrow, automotive needs tomorrow. I think this visual explains or identifies some of the automotive needs for tomorrow, and some of these were discussed, like V2X and V2V. They were discussed in previous presentations, so I'm not going to go into more details. But those who want to know more about any of these bullets, please go to the URL indicated at the bottom. So the previous presentation also included DSRC, that I think is primarily used for the vehicular communications, that is the inter-vehicle communications, one vehicle talking to another vehicle. So that's where that is used. Now, as I said, there is a potential for privacy breach, because once you open your automobile to external world, so now external world can get into the heart of your automobile. So there's a potential breach, and that could involve data security, and it could be privacy protection issue, or it could be connecting the cars to the world through internet. That means that you have now potential for hacking into your automobile. So I have a short video on this slide. If you just go back, and this is going to highlight. 1 second, please. So just imagine. Okay. This is my favorite TV show. So if you just wait for 1 second, imagine in this video that the lamp that is going to be shown in this video is like your headlights of your automobile, and the stereo, imagine it's your dashboard infotainment system. So with that introduction, could you please play that?
Okay. The X10s are online.
Gentlemen, I am now about to send a signal from this laptop through our local ISP, racing down fiber optic cable at the speed of light to San Francisco, bouncing off a satellite in geosynchronous orbit to Lisbon, Portugal, where the data packets will be handed off to submerged transatlantic cables terminating in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and transferred across the continent via microwave relays back to our ISP and the X10 receiver attached to this lamp.
Look at me! I've got goosebumps.
Are we ready on the stereo?
Go for stereo.
So this is an example of a potential breach or hacking that could happen. And so imagine you're now driving up the hill, windy road, nighttime, your headlights are on, and something happens to your headlights, and what will be the fate of this particular driver? So there's a potential breach. So these things have to be considered, and what parts of an automobile are going to be exposed to external world. These are some of the issues that auto OEMs are looking into, and I have been talking with most of the auto OEMs in recent few months. That I've communicated with CE4A, which is the Consumer Electronics for Automotives. This is a German auto OEM's special interest group, and I've been communicating with JASPAR, which is Japanese auto OEMs, and I'm also in communication with one of the luxury brands from UK. Don't want to say their name because they told me not to. So it is now from this visual, what I want to say is that you see that the high-level requirements, which are already listed in your SB 1077. This is, I inserted this slide only for the continuity purposes, so you are familiar with all these bullets. I'll move to the next one. Some of RUC system goals, and I don't know why I've been using RUC, even though some of you are saying it as RC. So there is a messaging issue here that we need to correct.
Julie will square you away.
Yeah. So this one, I think, is. I think this is one of the recommendations or guidance to system design from my point of view. The system design should have a forward-looking feature built into it, given the pace of technology evolution. The goal of the system will not only become a model for other states, but will become a best practice example for the entire world. And I thank you for your time, and if there are any questions, I may answer them if I know the answers.
Any questions for Ishwar? Thank you very much for the presentation. And again, we heard from Lee Tien, and I chatted with him a little bit a bit ago. The whole issue of how we integrate all of this avalanche of data, telematics, the notion of privacy, those are things that are very important in what we do. And so part of what we got today with our panel discussion and with what Ishwar added and what he does in his life involving vehicle telematics is just what we end up coming up with as recommendations need to be sensitive to those issues, to make sure that vehicles can't get hacked, to make sure that data that is collected in the vehicles from a privacy standpoint stays in the vehicle, except for, in our case at least, just the miles traveled. That's really all we need to worry about sending. And so those are things, as we move forward in our recommendations, for those instances where telematics and electronics are incorporated, that the legislature would want to require that data that's collected. So as you saw, you could eliminate fast-track transponders by just knowing that that vehicle traveled in a carpool lane or over a toll road. You're charged for that, and that just sends that information, not when you were there or where you were. And those are the kind of things that, as we've seen today, technologically are possible. So thank you very much for that. Any questions or comments from members of the task force before we break? I want to ask, are there any members of the audience that have questions or comments that have had a chance to say anything yet? I'm going to, before we break for lunch, and it looks like we're running a little early, which is wonderful, I'm going to turn to the chair of the California Transportation Commission, Lucy Dunn, to see if she wants to say anything, or if anything, thank you all for serving, as I know she's always talking about it.
Well, I welcome you also to beautiful Orange County. This is called Chamber of Commerce Weather that we arranged just for you, and really thank you for your hard work on this. It is, there's no question This is cutting edge, and California is known for its cutting edge activities. I am going to be absolutely fascinated as we try to tackle all of this new technology that the private sector is so far ahead in many, many ways and always has been from where government is, and how this transforms the way government has to do business in order to forget the public catching up. Government is, I truly, I'm thinking about this during all these presentations. We literally have an agency at the County of Orange that still doesn't use email. And I'm looking at this going, holy shit, they're going to be really behind. So those are the kind of things that are very interesting to me, to see how do we catch up and not let government drag down this innovation and new technology. So it, as they, tend to be extraordinarily cautious and risk adverse, and rightfully so we protect our public. So thank you for your hard work and presentation. Thank you for the importance of the work that you do here today. And we're relying on your success. We absolutely need you to succeed in some good recommendations, because it's coming whether we're ready for it or not, as you said. So thanks.
Thank you very much, Lucy. All right, seeing no other questions or comments, we will reconvene at exactly 1 p.m. We'll break for lunch.